shop owner whenever he's going to get the flowers was Philby in the
Yes, I
60
noticed that.
version
I noticed that.
Really?
of the movie. Yeah.
Who was?
The flower shop
just
owner.
the flower shop owner when he goes in.
That's a good catch.
Right?
I wouldn't have noticed that.
I didn't
That's
know.
awesome.
And he died, I think, right after the movie was made, or at least
man.
shortly thereafter.
Oh man.
It was really interesting.
What a mute note to go out on.
I know.
That's
Yeah.
bad.
Or he vanished into time. They actually
Yeah.
don't know what happened to
Yeah,
him.
he just disappeared forever.
was
Okay, so
frustrating.
the 2002 movie, I think we can just like unanimously agree that it was terrible,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, it was.
It's
It tried.
it's-
It could have been a
I
good
thought it
movie.
was
It didn't try.
fun. It's enjoyable
It
in
reminded
like
me-
a guilty pleasure kind of way.
It should have just not even said that it was.
It is
based
not
on the
faithful
book.
to the book.
No, it's
at
not.
all.
I don't even think it tries.
It
I
should
mean-
have just called the Eloi and the Morlocks different things, and then it would have been something totally different. It shouldn't have even acted
Right.
like it was a book
It
adaptation.
was insulting, like the references that they gave to H.G. Wells.
Yeah, that's what
and
we were
then never
saying.
like staying true to any of his work.
Yeah.
But I don't know. The biggest thing to me, even more than all of the like dishonesty and like the creative freedoms, if you want to be nicer about it, throughout the whole movie, was just like the really weak lead. I didn't like the time traveler. I
No.
thought he was
man.
terrible.
Yes.
I love Guy Pearce. I don't
He's
know what
like
you're
a-
talking
What
about
What
is
there.
was
that?
he in? Because I've
I
He's like
felt
a-
like he really had a lot of conviction for the part, even if it like the part he was given doesn't have a lot of meat to it, like you would hope.
He was really one-dimensional.
But like when he's going crazy and he's like really working on the time machine,
Yeah.
his friend's coming to visit him, and he's just like having this kind of stern conversation with his friend. I really thought he did a good job selling the emotions of the scene, and I like him as an actor. There's actually a funny story, personal story behind this movie for me, where I remember I was a kid and we were going to the movies, and I really wanted to see The Time Machine, but my family wanted to see The Count of Monte Cristo. So I was
Man,
outvoted.
That's a great
That
movie.
movie is actually really great. And Guy Pearce is in both movies, and he's the villain in The Count of Monte Cristo, and
That's
he's like
what-
the main
oh,
good guy
okay, that's
hero
where I
in this
remember
one.
from.
So we went to see The Count of Monte Cristo, and we left, and my dad felt bad that we went to see this other movie, even though I ended up loving it. He felt bad that I had to go see that instead of seeing The Time Machine. So the next night he took me to see The Time Machine, but I'd just seen this guy play like this really sleazy villain, and I just could not like buy him as a good guy after
Yeah.
that. It was very, very difficult.
That's funny.
Man,
And
I didn't know that he had been in anything else because I had never
Oh,
seen
yeah,
him.
he's
I
in,
knew
uh,
I had seen him in something. I could not
He's
remember.
Probably
what he
most
was in.
famous for Memento, the Christopher Nolan movie, where
yeah.
he tattoos himself, and the
Right.
whole movie plays backwards.
Oh,
Scene by
yeah, I
scene.
forgot he's
Right.
in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I felt like it was really weird just because, and I guess that was just another like bone for me to pick with the story because there was like so many different things that weren't happening that maybe should have happened because they changed so much. And there's one thing
Yeah.
that both of the movies change, which is that they add one stop in time just like 100 years in the future. Or
Yeah.
like some like 20 or
So
50
far
years
into
in
the future, just to kind of.
to like visit the new world, just like slightly advanced.
Which I guess
So-
I guess there are two stops like that in both movies.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
but not in the book though,
Yeah.
right? They did never do that in the
He
book.
just
But
goes
they
straight
both
to
in
the-
both movies they didn't do the trips at the end where he went even farther into the future.
Which I can,
Right.
Yeah.
you know,
Which is
I
okay.
understand some of the changes are made to make it more cinematic, where in a
Mhm.
movie you have to have like a climax and to keep going from there. I do think they could still make that
They could have.
further trip
They could
work.
be like
They
Lord of
could
the
make
Rings with
this
5
movie-
endings.
Oh man, and they left out the main ending from the books too.
So like, you know how they
I
made
forgot.
like The Hobbit like really well, and it took them forever because The Hobbit has like all this
Really
grandeur and like
well?
dragons and like you have to have like CGI for it. Well, like they could have done this today with this book, and like it could have been really well made.
Yeah,
Like
I agree.
I would have eaten it up. Like it,
And there's so many dark elements in the book that are just like never really conveyed.
And the thing is, like, about the scientist, the whole entire time, like, he's or the time traveler, he's so, he's so smart, and so he's learning all these things, and these are his theories. Every time, like in these 2 movies, he's learning this information like secondhand. He's like, well, why are they like that? And he's asking it instead of figuring this out himself.
They did that in both movies, though, and it was so irritating.
And I
It made
think
me so mad.
the reason they do that is just because they don't want to they want to cut down on narration and like inner dialogue and exposition and stuff. I think it's just another. Absolutely, like probably the writer did that, but I think if the writer didn't, the producer would have cut that
of course,
out immediately.
that's why they had to make the Eloi talk. They had to do that.
Oh,
we can now
God,
agree
the
that it's
scene where she's
Eloi.
talking about.
I
Like,
guess so, because both the movies call him that, even though I
Yeah.
don't think that's how it's supposed to be pronounced.
I'm pretty
but-
sure it's
No.
Eloi.
Whatever. I'm just gonna
I say
say it.
Eloi.
I don't care.
Eloi.
Eloi.
Man, the scene though
I
where
do think it's supposed to
Weena
be
was
Eloi.
like showing
Yeah,
him that
I think
area
so,
where she learned
but-
English
yeah.
from her parents.
That's
That
not
was
even
the
Weena.
dumbest thing.
Well,
Thing.
and
Her
then
name
they
starts
do.
with an M.
Oh yeah, I think they thought Weena was probably a little.
I feel like Weena got split into 2 characters: the little boy
It's a.
and
Okay,
the mom.
Also,
It sounds
why
like
does she
a. It
have a
sounds like a
kid?
guy with a Boston accent saying wiener.
Yeah,
Weena.
And
We got a
the
Weena
2002
here.
We got a
movie
Weena over
is
here.
different because it's set in New York originally. So he's a professor at Columbia in New York City.
Yeah.
Rather than being
Rather
like,
than being in England. So, which like doesn't like do a lot, but it was confusing when it first started out.
So dumb.
Oh,
The fact that they
so-
had kids was so stupid.
So we'll just refresh the whole story so
made
we
me
can
so
like
mad.
hash it out. So just interrupt as I go through the summary, and then we can talk about it as it goes, just so we
Sure.
can cover as much as possible. So the time traveler takes his lover out on a date. That's pretty much where like the first big scene happens, right after we
Yes.
leave
Yeah,
the
she, like,
university at
skates
New
up to
York.
him.
Yeah, he's talking about everybody walking around in bowler hats and stuff.
Mhm. And he proposes to her in the park at night, and they get mugged at gunpoint. The now fiance puts a bit of struggle up and gets shot by the mugger. The time traveler at this point is now motivated to create the time machine, which he does over the course of 4 years.
And this is like the first big departure and major mistake, I think, of the movie.
Is
that
immediately.
he is
Yeah.
motivated by love because
Yes.
because it's Hollywood and they think they have to put a love story into everything. When someone being motivated by the pursuit of knowledge
Mm-hmm.
is so much
Is-
better
yeah.
for that's the whole purpose of
Well, it's one of the
science
staples
fiction like
of the
this.
scenes that come later.
Yeah.
Right. This is what like justifies his rage with the Eloi. Whenever he finds out that curiosity and the nature of inquiry has been snuffed out over the course of
Yeah.
800,000 years. So
And
also, have we checked the
instead-
numbers on the I don't know if the numbers are accurate either. Like how many
What?
years he traveled
Yeah,
into the
it
future.
I
looked
think
like
it's-
it was.
I
It
think
said
it's still the-
802,
Yeah, I think it's still the same.
701.
Wait a minute. I
right?
think I made a note in my phone about this
Good.
because I knew I would not remember any of this.
So yeah, they departed from the story immediately with the love interest story.
Yeah, it was
So
frustrating
bad.
because it took away from him being an intellectual,
Mm-hmm.
like immediately. Like one thing, like if I think about scientists or I think about people who are like extremely driven, they don't have love interests, and that's like the whole appeal of it is that they're very self-motivated.
That was the good thing about the book is that he's going forward in the future just to learn about it.
Yeah, and just because
for,
he's vigorous and like excited about it. all
yeah,
on his
he's
own.
doing it for like knowledge reasons, not to like find out how he can save his woman in the past.
Yeah, that
It's
just
so
destroyed-
stupid.
It changed like his character.
Yeah, that's a
completely.
drastic change to the character right there.
Mm-hmm.
Huge.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's not a good one either because
It's a
that's just
terrible
not
choice.
who the time traveler
It's just
is.
so it's cliched and
The
Yeah, it
whole
was
movie
re-
was
it was-
cliche. That's
it was
what I feel like it
extremely watered
is.
down.
yeah.
It was
Yeah.
taking aspects of all these other movies that it thinks are like good cinematic stuff, like action scenes and all this stuff, and like romance, someone dying, and they have
Yeah.
a tragic story.
Which I mean, they're
And it
making
combined-
they're trying to make a
monologue.
Yeah, and
profit
it
after all.
combined it in such an awful way.
It was bad. So
You
that
have to have one main villain to like be their foe in the end.
so
Oh,
just
it's
right
so
off the bat, you
bad.
start watching the movie, and within the first like not even 15 minutes, you realize as a person who's read the book, this is not going to be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is
It
not
was
going to
really
turn out very good.
frustrating.
So he ends up over the course of 4 years developing this technology, the time machine, so that he can travel back in time and prevent the death of his fiance. So this is exactly what he does. He travels back. He ends up saving her, only for her to be killed again. This time, instead of by a mugger, a horse and carriage.
And it makes no sense. It's like, it's movie logic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Right.
It's like,
Well, if she wouldn't have died, then if she wouldn't have died, you wouldn't have made the time machine. She has to die. Like, that was the whole the crux of it. So no matter how many times he would save her, she would die because he would never be able to go back and he would have never made the time machine.
it's like some
apparently.
11/22/63 type of thing where
Right.
time is kind of pushing back a bit. Like,
Yeah.
That there's
not
some-
quite as sinister, but it's just correcting it. in
right.
order
That
for
there's a
him to-
predestination to nature and that you can't alter. Like,
And
that
then-
if someone's meant to die, that they're going to, and there's nothing you can do to stop that.
And I kept wondering, is there another him running around looking for his fiance?
That's what I'm saying. He
'Cause
was
he's-
like, "You're gonna see me, and I'm in a little bit, and I'm not gonna know anything."
I'm just
That's what he-
imagining him like having to murder himself in the park just to kind of
Right.
keep it quiet and
And
correct
that's one
it.
thing. That's one thing across. That's one thing that I think the book addressed by not addressing it, because he never traveled to a point in time in which
He
he
only
would.
went forward.
He only went forward, and the only time that he. But then again, he did go backwards.
He
Yeah.
did, but like
No,
not
but
to
then
the
what
point
would
where he
happen?
meet
It would be a
himself.
constant loop, because every time that he goes back, his other versions of himself have just left.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, that's
So
why
he's
in the book
constantly
he
arriving
comes
and
back a
constantly
week
leaving.
later.
Yeah,
Forever.
Yeah.
I guess so.
I don't know. I,
mean-
don't. If anyone has anything to contribute, like especially if
It's-
you're watching this
It's a
video,
paradox.
comment, tell
I
us
mean-
the
It's
science.
a movie time travel thing, so it.
I mean,
Yeah.
you
H.G.
kind of
Wells.
just have to ignore
That's
it.
one of the big deals, though, about like the why I hate the 2002 movie so much is because H.G. Wells was like one of the cutting edge science fiction writers. So like for him to
Yeah.
put so much effort into his science fiction.
And it leans so much on logic.
Yeah, and it was like reasonable science fiction logic that like deceived you to such a point as a layman in science
Yeah.
that this is totally believable.
Yeah.
And that kind of deception through entertainment that forced you into that suspense of belief as a reader is not present in
Yeah.
either of the movies, really.
They broke the third wall basically. Like, you know, we're walking.
Maybe
He
so
goes and he
mad.
travels into the future and he sees,
hate
oh,
it.
everybody's living on a lunar colony and everybody's rushing about whatever.
Yeah, what's
And he goes to the library and it's not any books anymore, but it's like that one guy.
The hologram.
He's
Yeah.
trying to find answers for why he can't just save his
And he-
fiance,
yeah.
the love of his life.
Right. And so that's
That
brings
when
up-
pushes him farther and farther into the future. on
right.
his
So
quest
after
for
she
answers.
dies for the second time, he decides, and I think at this point too, since he's traveled back into time, he's gonna have to build his time machine again, right? Or no, he still has
No,
it.
he still has it, so he just goes from there.
Yeah. Okay. So
yeah,
he
he's
just
got it
he
with
just,
him. Got
so-
that fang on him.
So then he ends up having this desire now, since he's determined after 2 attempts that he's going to be unable to save his fiance, which I guess in theory he could just try again later, maybe, right? Like if
I
he
mean,
feels like it,
Sure.
because he can, right? If he
Yeah.
ever wants to see his fiance again, he just has to travel to like, I don't know, like 10 years before she dies.
He
then
literally
he
could
gets to
if he
spend that
wanted
time
to.
with her.
He could just meet her earlier and then just spend all that time with her, move to a different place, and then just keep doing that.
So before he had
And
the
he'll take her
motivation
with him
to
on the
attempt to
time.
save his
Yeah.
fiance, now he has the motivation to try and answer this question: what if and why?
why can't
he
one
save her?
change the past?
Right. You can't. Why can you not decide for yourself your own destiny
Mm-hmm.
or alter the future? So he time travels 800,000 years into the future.
Well, first he goes to the.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
I
first he
think I
goes
missed
to the-
this on it. He goes
He goes to the well, it's New York, but it's
how far into the
it's
future?
2037.
Something like
no,
that.
2037 was the year that it was like ending.
Oh yeah, okay. So the world was ending in 2037, but a few years before that. So it's kind of around our
I think
time.
it was 2030.
Yeah, like 2030. So people are living on the moon, colonizing on the moon, and everything's speedy, whatever. And he goes to a library, and
He meets a really cute girl on a bike.
oh yeah,
Yeah, dude.
I was like, dang, dude, forget
felt-
that other one.
There was one of
Chase
the most
this
super
lady.
awkward
retro.
points in the show though, because like he's like looking around. Maybe he's like just starstruck, everything that he's seeing.
All the
But
screens,
he's just
holograms
walking
and
around like he's
stuff.
like autistic or something like that, because she's like talking to him. Is like, oh, like I like your retro fit, and he's like,
He doesn't know
Oh,
what she
thank
means.
you.
His clothing
Yeah.
is like
Yeah.
clearly
and
from the
I'm
1800s.
just like, dude, talk, bro. Like,
was,
you're not
super-
mute.
you're
And then
so
she says,
retro.
"What kind of
yeah.
coffee does that thing make?" Talking about the
She
time
was like,
machine.
I
Yeah.
bet that makes a hell of a cappuccino.
Yeah.
Which,
And he's
by
like,
the way, is a really old joke, considering how like far in the future she is. I doubt they use cappuccino machines that look anything like that.
Okay, because
Who knows?
they're referencing in 2002 what they think the future is going to be like, and cappuccinos were getting popular in like 2002.
Right.
So they're thinking like, oh, this new age, people are going to be like kind of spacey and cool.
And it does look complex,
We're all
like a
gonna wear
cappuccino,
jumpsuits.
like an
Yeah.
espresso machine.
Right.
We're all going to
Um,
ride our bikes everywhere.
But I think
They all
also
have,
I
like, the
read on
birds
the
that are in cities and
IMDb
stuff.
trivia
That'd be
that this
cool.
prop
You know,
that
little
was the
scooters?
time machine
Yeah.
was
Mhm.
like the
I want one.
biggest single
so
prop
cool.
ever made for any movie.
Really?
What?
Yeah, the time machine. I do think that's one thing in this movie. The time
time
machine
machine looks
itself
great.
looks awesome.
It does look
It does
Yeah.
look cool, and it spins around.
I like
and
that
it
he
creates
has
a
the little
force field.
stairs that come down.
Yeah,
Those are
like lets them
cool.
down with a little rope and
I
stuff.
agree. It looked good. It
And
looked very good.
I mean, and they really used a lot of research for like focused lenses and stuff like
Mhm.
that add to the the glass that's on the machine.
yeah,
make it
I
look
saw
real
that the
fancy.
kind of like reflective or refractionary glass
Yeah.
that was on the outside that made this partial spheres and stuff. It looked beautiful. I thought
Yeah.
it was a great prop.
It was really
Best part of the
cool.
movie
Yeah.
was the time machine.
And
Yes.
yeah, and
Yeah,
I
I
liked
agree.
the dials, how they spun, and it was like
Yeah, they
gears
looked
and
phenomenal.
It
and
was cool.
It made sense because it does look like something that could be made in the 1800s,
Yeah,
Yeah.
like for real.
great job, prop
Yeah.
department.
Yeah, so
So-
that's where he traveled into like 32 or whatever.
30, and then he goes to 37, and the moon is breaking apart.
Yeah, that was 2030.
Right.
And 7 years later, the moon's breaking apart and the world's ending, and he was like, he gets his hands zip tied by a police officer.
Yeah,
And they're, like,
while
coming
there's
with
like
us.
debris falling from the
Mhm.
sky and everything.
Yeah, and they're like, come on, come with us. And he was like,
Come
What
with
have
me
you
if you
been-
want to live.
he was like, what have you been living under a rock? And he was like, actually, yes. And he was like, the moon's falling out of the sky.
Yeah, the colony that they established on the moon, the like whatever sort of explosions they were doing to mine up there or something,
Which I will,
it went haywire.
yeah.
and so-
Which like I will just say, if like our moon explodes, like it's gonna be catastrophic like that, but like it will wipe out humanity to the point there's not gonna be any Eloi or Morlock.
Yeah, they're trying,
Like,
and this is sort of them trying to explain how the Morlocks eventually come about, because they are getting underground into shelters to get away from the debris of the moon falling, and it's how it's going to ruin the Earth's atmosphere for a
It would
while.
just make like massive tsunamis. Like
Yeah.
our moon controls our
Yeah.
ocean, and it would just like we would have just massive tsunamis, and we would just have catastrophic flooding.
Yeah.
There would be no humanity left.
I mean, to be completely honest though, like other than there was no, I left it out of my summary probably because that entire like 2032 or whatever visit useless to the plot. Like it didn't push anything forward
the only
at all.
Thing is
It
that
was
we
just
knew about
useless
the moon.
exposition.
It's just to show, like, look how cool. Here's another stop along the way.
Yes.
This is what the future could look like, maybe.
And then he got
And yeah, he runs from the cops, and they're like, "Forget him, dude. We got to get underground." And then while he's restarting the time machine, he's knocked unconscious,
oh yeah, he gets beat up in it,
and makes him push the lever forward. And by the time he finally wakes up, he's in the year 802,701, which is that the correct date from the book?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's 802,701.
Yeah. Brooke is the one that remembered that the previous conversations.
Okay,
I
guess she's a
remember
number
it
lady.
always.
always.
It's burned. I actually got a tattoo on my birthday.
Oh, they also they name him Alexander in
Yes,
the movie.
this is
Oh, I
Alexander
hate in
now.
both movies they have names.
Right.
Every character, like,
Mhm. Well, and actually, when we start talking about the 1960s one, I think out of all the names they could have chose, that one was okay
Yeah.
because his name was
George.
George Wells.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean,
Which-
which is weird. I don't.
I mean, in the original, it's
The narrator is H.G. Wells.
the narrator
And
is
then they
H.G.
just
Wells.
push
He's
him
he's
together
marking down
filming.
his story.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I kind of wish that they had made him just. You don't need to say the guy's name. There have been plenty of movies where main characters do not have a name at all.
I'm
Right.
pretty sure
It's
that
true.
movie with
Well, the only time that you
that
figure
war
out his name
movie
is-
with like Harry Styles that was
Mm.
during the Winston
Um,
Churchill thing. What is that movie called? I was trying to think of it the other day, but
None.
I'm pretty sure
It's-
Oh my god.
none of those characters have names.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. Ugh.
What was that movie called?
It's a name of something. It's like not 19 some. You know the
No,
one that
it's
was like
the
19,
place where they
17?
were.
Yeah.
Huh? Dunkirk.
Dunkirk. thank you.
Dunkirk, the main character
Alexander
only has
coming in
like
clutch
2
with that info.
lines.
Yeah.
I know. Like the main character only has like 2
Our own
lines
personal
in the movie.
Alexander.
Yes.
Yeah. So we had Alexander, and like that was frustrating. And
Yeah.
they shouldn't have given him a name because he was just such a boring, floppy, one-dimensional character that was like.
Maybe they knew that and they thought, man, if we don't even give this guy a name, this is barely a character at
Yeah,
all.
Yeah.
exactly. We got to have something to latch on to.
Something.
So he travels 800,000 years into the future, where he meets a new race called, by the movie,
The Eloi.
Eloi, that speak a new language that he can't understand, but also English, which they refer to as the Stone language. The first
Yeah.
woman that he meets says that the younger generations, the children, learn the Stone language, aka English, when they're young, and so
and
it would
then they
be
forget it.
then they forget it. So,
Yeah.
but she's the
Yeah.
teacher, so she remembers.
Yeah, and she's not even a Weena.
I mean, here's the deal.
She is Mina, I think.
She's something with an
I
M,
thought
and
her
then her
name
son.
was Amma. Wait, isn't it like Mara?
Mara.
Yeah, it's Mara.
I think that's right.
Um,
Yeah, they.
the fact that they have parents in this world and there are children, that's like literally.
It's like a community of people.
Yeah, that's literally a
It is
point
a
in the book
thriving
is that there are
community.
no.
And they live on cliffs.
Yeah,
In what used
they
to
all
be New
work
York,
together.
and they just lower their boats down to go fishing. They've got a whole like
It's
society.
I
Yeah.
feel like it's just like a really like making huge assumptions that any of this would be left over 800,000 years into the future.
Literally.
I don't think even the stone that was there would still be there, let alone
No,
English.
the moon
Yeah,
fell
it's-
on New York. The moon.
They do explain how English is still around, but
They learn it from those like little blocks.
Which
but
makes
why
no
are those
That's
still
the
around?
That's
Yeah.
the one thing that again doesn't make any sense, but rationalizes why they still know English.
also
is
when he went to the library's not underground, and everything was destroyed by like the lunar
Did they bring it up
destruction.
there?
So
Did they unearth it and then?
yeah,
lay all
maybe
of it
somebody
out?
brought it underground.
it
Who knows?
probably-
maybe it was underground and then it like eroded to where
So,
now it's on the
yeah.
surface.
But this is an action movie, so we have no time for this
Yeah,
sort of
and it's
exposition.
Don't
only-
think
yeah,
about
guys,
it.
It's
Only
only
action.
an hour and a half long. It is
Yeah.
literally an hour and a half long, and most movies are like 2 hours, 15 minutes. Like
Mhm.
there's nothing that like really, it's too fast. It just rushes things like very very quickly. It
Yeah.
had to
Yeah.
like really push through.
I think one thing about the Eloi is that might be like more positive is that they are like people of color, which
Makes
most
more
likely
sense.
people in the future
was
would be
thinking that
more
today.
mixed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like they're most likely not going to be a lot of
A lot of like
Wrens in the future.
yeah, not a lot
Or
of these.
Brooks.
Or Brooks. Yeah.
Get them while they're hot, folks.
There's not gonna be a lot of us.
Yeah, so they're in the future now, and we've discovered that they speak the stone language. This is just a convenient plot convenience, because how are we going to have communication between characters if they don't know English?
Yeah.
And-
No one wants to read subtitles.
Boy, we sure could make this guy interesting here, but let's not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then they have the thing from the library, and he's underground.
Does he find that?
He discovers
yet?
that a little later.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, let's see.
So I put on here, I said, as soon as his previous romantic interest dies, the time traveler immediately finds a new one.
Yeah, because there
yeah.
has to be romance.
Yeah, because there can't not be romance.
Yeah,
Rebound.
his other lady died, so
Well,
he
it's been
has
4
to find
years.
someone.
And she's
Yeah.
like
It's been a
really
minute for him.
elusive too, because as soon as she meets, first of all, like I don't know how he survives or whatever. She ends up finding him whenever he time travels there, and then like brings him into her hut or whatever in the village.
And she's nursing his wounds.
That's set up on all these like mountain walls and
How'd
stuff.
she get him in there? Is she really strong?
I guess.
Yeah.
I don't think she is though.
Well, there
Maybe
are
she's
other
illegal.
people.
She made her kid do it.
I think probably other villagers. Most likely
Helped.
just her.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not her kid. It's her brother.
Oh, she
And
made
it's
that
the
little
actual
kid.
actress' little brother.
That's cool.
Really?
Yeah.
She
That's
was like, "Hey,
convenient.
kid."
This
Pull
lady
this
was like
man
an Irish singer, pop star for a minute. And yeah, I don't know. This is like the only movie I think she's ever done. And then she was out. She's not bad in it.
Not terrible, no.
No,
But not
but-
notable. But I don't know.
Yeah.
So she I
Weird.
always thought her behavior was really weird whenever you first meet her character.
Oh.
Because he's like asking all these questions, you know, like as one would do when he ends
she's
up
like-
so far in the future.
Oh, silly man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and
She
he's
was like, I told them he hit his head, that you hit your head,
and that you're stupid, and I
that
was
you're an
like,
idiot, and I was
wow.
like, okay.
Yeah.
And then also he was like, so why can't we go out at night? And she was like, because of the monsters or whatever. And he's like, what monsters? She
And
was
then-
like, you don't need to know.
Well,
I was like,
he was having
This is
nightmares.
information we should be sharing with this man.
Right?
So
Clearly he doesn't know.
Yeah. He's laying there, like, sleeping, and he has a nightmare, and he wakes up, and she's like, don't worry, we all have that nightmare. And he's like, what do you
Yeah,
mean?
this is the main, like,
Okay, how would you-
unnecessary aspect of this movie where it's
He's
like,
having a creepy dream, and this guy with, like, these really terrible white contacts on, and he's like,
this
wow,
is
and you could just zoom in close to his face, and it's kind of creepy.
Jeremy Irons absolutely slumming it in this movie.
Yes.
Like, he's been in some great stuff.
For real. Yes.
It was bad.
So okay, so we have this like whole village established, and he's there for like a little while, and then these monsters called Morlocks attack the village and abduct several Eloi. Eloi. Gosh, I don't know why I want to put that hard I on there. The Eloi, including the current love interest. The time traveler puts up a big fight. We have this huge action scene that unfolds. It's really unbelievable because honestly, these Morlocks are freaking huge. They're like massive
They're
gorillas.
Morlocks
These
are
are-
supposed to be like 5 feet tall.
They're like gorilla
I
humans.
think,
They would destroy. They could just rip them apart where they are.
Tim Burton's
And they-
Planet of the Apes remake came out like a couple years before this, so they're kind of tapping into that a little bit.
It
Yeah.
looks
And,
very.
yeah, they're big
They make-
gorillas.
They
They-
shoot out little
Yeah,
darts.
they hold
Yeah.
little
Which
dart
also-
guns.
which
and
what
doesn't
are-
shit.
make any sense.
What do the darts
Okay,
even
look.
do? Because
Nothing.
no one is passed
no,
out
I
or
figured
anything.
it
I
out.
think that it adds a scent
A
to them
scent,
because they show
yes,
the other
that's what I'm saying.
sniffing, and then they'll start
Because-
charging after the ones with the scent.
Right.
Oh my god.
But it's like-
None of that
Yeah,
makes
because
any sense because they're
Alexander,
all
like,
being
smelled it in
cerebrally
there.
controlled.
Well, it does make sense.
Also, why are they? They're attacking in the
You're all night,
daylight,
Yeah,
and then
they
they're
attacked
like
in broad
shooting
daylight.
that was the
darts
main
to
thing. I was like,
smell
this is
them.
daytime, and then later they go out of their way to say they can't see very well in the sunlight.
Then why did they go out in the
Yeah, they're
daytime?
right. That was
Yeah.
one of my biggest critiques.
Also, they shoot the little brother of Mara in the leg, and it's like, don't they wait till people mature to snag them and bring them
Apparently
underground
not.
for
Yeah.
food?
And he,
Right.
Why would they take this little kid?
Yeah, it
just
doesn't-
so the guy has to go save him.
Also, why do you need to mark them with a scent? There's so many of them just gathered together. Take a few from the outside of the horde and then just bring. You don't need to blow any darts into them.
I
Yeah.
think it was just to design different looking
Yeah.
Morlocks. You've got the hunters, you've got the dart
Oh,
They
Yeah.
blowers.
all
Into
look
that.
dumb.
and then
anyway.
they literally just didn't emerge from like a well or anything. They just shot up out of
They
the fucking
shot out of the
ground.
sand,
Out of the
and then they
dirt.
grabbed someone and shot back into the sand.
They just came
So, like,
back out
is there
and
an
then they would-
elevator that's like waiting for them? It like lifts them out of the sand and they jump
Yeah.
back on it.
It
like,
for sure
lowers
defies
them
all
again.
physics.
And one point in this movie, Guy Pearce, who plays Alexander, like shoulder tackles one of the
Yeah, they're
Morlocks
like
out of the
made
way.
of paper mache. Like,
And yeah, I think he broke one of his ribs when he did it.
really?
Yeah, just shoved this dude really hard
Oh
and
my
it broke his
gosh.
rib.
Oh my god.
Broke his own rib.
The
doing it.
Morlocks were
my God.
like they were made of like paper. Like they just could be batted around, and they were huge monkeys.
Yeah.
I
They
know.
would not move anywhere. They would
Yeah.
just tear you apart.
Did you see them whenever they all jumped in front of the Eloi, and they all have like giant football player like thighs and stuff, and they're like
bigger?
"Grr."
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and
they make bull noises, and that makes it even like
Oh
scarier.
man,
Yeah.
they replay the same sound clip over and over
Yes.
of a bull
It's
that's
bad.
angry.
Yes.
Yeah. Over and over.
Oh,
like
no.
Yeah.
They even put
that sounded more like a seal, but
I may have been mistaken,
Yeah.
but they put the Wilhelm scream in there.
they put it in
Yeah, I think
everything.
they
They
did.
really.
Yeah,
I
and
swear
was
I
like-
put a note in my phone about this movie because I remember writing all of this stuff down.
So it
was so
was
bad.
a terrible fight scene. None of it was thrilling. The whole
all
fight scene
bad.
dragged. It was unbelievable
I skipped
in the
it.
worst
I was
way.
watching
I skipped
And,
it. I was like, bye.
uh,
No, I'm not gonna watch it.
And
do
so
anything
he
for the
after
plot.
this
Yeah.
after this encounter, he gets all upset like they do. This is a commonality between the book and the other movies, is that he gets upset with everybody, all the other Eloi, for not fighting back and defending themselves. And this is kind of when he realizes that there's been some huge cultural changes that have taken place since he was on Earth, like previously 800,000 years before. And then he enters into their underground lair pretty quickly. And this time he doesn't go through the sand, but he goes through a different like rock portal,
Yeah,
like a tunnel,
jagged,
Rock
like
yeah,
a
it
t-
was weird.
jagged cavern
And I don't know
that
if
goes
I'm.
down. And he was like
Wait, hold on, was that the
sheer
first
rock
movie?
climbing.
Yeah, it was
Hold
like
on.
a straight cliff.
He had a piece of rope that was like probably 12
dropped
feet
it,
long
though.
and
Yeah.
immediately dropped it. Like it wouldn't have even helped him anyways because he looked like he was going hundreds of feet down into the
Yeah.
earth.
Which it is like, it looks fairly faithful to the book's description. There's a lot of machinery that you don't know what
Yeah.
it does that they're working with, and the whole place is just smells horrible and
Right.
Yeah.
lots of blood.
Yeah, not too bad on all of that.
But man, it's got one of those scenes where like the main character falls into a giant puddle of like dead bodies and blood,
I
and it's like
know.
I'm just thinking of every
Well,
little
he's-
cut on a person's body that's getting so badly infected from this.
yes,
Yeah.
it's so gross.
Yeah, it was gross. Because he saw those hooks and they were like dripping with blood, and he was like, "Huh," and he started just falling back.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know about you, but like I don't know. I just wouldn't do that if I was like in a familiar place. I don't walk backwards. Like, I don't walk backwards.
I don't know.
That's dangerous. But they always have to
don't
do
know.
this. They always stumble back, like whenever they see something scary, and he fell into that pit of just
I
skeletons.
think like falling
and
back
blood.
is more realistic than like stumbling back. Like
Mm-hmm.
But he
Like- being startled, taking a step, and that one step stumbles you, and
Yeah,
you fall
that's-
back from that.
yeah.
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 but like taking a few steps back and you're like, "Ooh,"
This-
and then you
It's
I mean,
like
it's
you
the
just
same
walk,
thing as, like,
6 feet backwards. and
In like
fall into
horror
it.
movies
Yeah.
when they're being chased by the killer and
they
they
fall
trip
every
over
time.
nothing.
And then instead of getting back up, they just start crawling.
Oh,
Yeah.
Like
man.
what point does that serve?
And they're like, he's going to get this woman back, which they've decided to change the character's motivation from the book, as we discussed, to a love interest. And it's like, why would you not spend more time like setting up this relationship?
I feel like they had
so
no
that-
relationship. They had no chemistry.
yeah, you're supposed
they
to
had
buy that
no
he's suddenly
nothing.
like in love
Mhm.
with this woman. And it's like,
Why would he risk his life for her? Yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense.
first of all, you're a
Yeah.
white guy from the 1800s. I don't think you're falling for
don't
this
know.
black woman.
No.
That's true.
Oh, that's
true.
I didn't even think of that. Yeah, he
Mhm.
probably like in the world that he grew up in the time, he was most likely not into.
Of course, they try to
different
show that he's
races.
like very forward thinking in a lot of ways.
He wouldn't
Right.
be. Even
And
the most
I
forward
know,
thinking in
it's
the
so, like,
1800s
Hollywood.
would not.
Well, and you were
Fantasy.
talking about race a second ago. You're saying that they were mixed together and stuff like that. I envisioned the Eloi. I think they were described as being fair-skinned, right?
They
were.
are in the
Yeah,
book.
which
like
makes sense
angelic.
because they wouldn't have as many harsh rays to deal with because somehow like the earth is just like mellowed out by that time, and so there's nothing harsh to deal with. And I
Yeah.
associate increased
Well,
melanin
don't they say it's always like
as like harsh sun rays having to deal with them.
it's like a lot of sunshine though, and then every once in
They
a while
would.
a storm cloud will rush through. Isn't that how it is in the
You know
book?
what?
I think so.
Yeah.
that Eloi
Because
should look like.
the storm
What?
clears really quickly because
Right.
the sun is always shining,
The
so it
Oompa
doesn't
Loompas
really
Makes sense.
Maybe
that
they
they're-
didn't
that they're
have.
fair
Charlie
skinned.
and the
Yeah,
Chocolate
maybe they didn't
Factory.
know about
Which
like
one?
remake.
Maybe there's something about the
Melatonin.
ozone
The
layer
remake
that
with
like
their hair that's
diffuses
like
the rays so they
in a curl.
they don't develop
Who knows?
more pigment. I don't know. So
Science beyond H.G. Wells,
right.
that's for sure.
So he's entered into the Morlock's
They're the
lair,
same
and there's
size.
all kinds of really goofy
just-
stuff that goes on while he's in there.
and he finally
and-
finds her,
Yeah.
and
She's
that's
in a
in, like, this
cage.
she's in a
weird
cage.
cage.
jagged plastic cage that she could have crawled out of because I was literally like looking at him and I'm
Yeah.
like, you're
And
not
it's-
trying. She was like trying to get this chain at one part in the movie, reaching out like, she could have reached it if she just like.
But it
I'm
also
girl,
looks
go
like
for
there
it."
was no bottom to the cage and it wasn't attached to the floor. Like, I
It was
don't
just,
know
like,
if that
set
was
on
just
top of
the
her.
prop that they just didn't make it look like it had any weight or was attached to anything, so she could have
Just scooted
moved
the whole
it
thing
off of her.
Oh my gosh, this was the worst movie. Like,
It's kind of like they were trying to have their cake and eat it too with a lot of this stuff. So like her not answering his questions that anybody would is like they're being ignorant in the books, and her not like finding a way to free herself better is like them being weak in the books
Right.
and easily
I
tired.
guess.
So it's like, why are you doing that if you're also going to make them intelligent and actually like functioning people?
Yeah,
Right.
like having a
And
functioning
and all of
society.
the functionality and the verbal communication through the stone language really made it for me not even notice that they were doing those things to try and make them seem feeble and innocent and incapable of defending
Yeah.
themselves. It just made it seem to me like it was just really terrible writing. I was just
Yeah.
like, this just looks
It's like-
awful.
And Vox, the hologram guy, is still around because they use him to replace the
Right.
museum that he
Which-
goes and visits at some
Which
point.
also makes sense and when we get to the end of the story too. So we'll mention Vox at the end because
Yeah.
he's not useful
Yeah.
until then. So
And it's also, I thought that was kind of the most pointless part of the book, was him going to that museum. He doesn't really learn anything. And
Right.
it doesn't benefit him.
which is why I forgot it when I was writing the summary down, because there's not any point to him traveling to that specific time
And
in
he
the
was
future.
like, even I remember you, time traveler. I remember that part.
Right, because like he time travels into the future and sees the moon blow up, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't matter though, because he still doesn't know why it blew up. Well, like what caused it?
Well, they do say the
Why?
demolition team on the moon.
They
that
just
was,
blew it
like,
up for no
colonizing.
reason?
Well,
They were
no,
colonizing,
drilling in the
and
moon
they just messed up really badly.
just cracked it open.
I know they
They were
like
like, the moon's
wanted to
falling.
That's a
set
grade
up
A
a
screw up
reason.
right
Right,
there.
cracked it open like a can of beer. Just
They wanted to like set up a reason why the world would be in the state that it is
We
in the
all
year
know-
he goes to, and they just do a terrible job of setting up a backstory for it. So why
Yeah.
even do it?
Little did they know it was actually Rona that was going to be the end of
I
this.
know.
yeah.
Plus, that's like one of the things that I love about the book in comparison to these movies is that H.G. Wells, and I can't mind read for him, but I would assume that
I can because I'm an Uber Morlock.
Ooh, yes, an
Oh
Uber
my
Morlock, which we're
God.
gonna get into soon. Oh my gosh.
What were you saying?
H.G. Wells wrote the book in such a way that it's still timeless, right?
Yeah.
So he didn't make any attempts, like he tried to predict the future to such an extent that it's probably the Earth's not even gonna be around by the time that happens, or at least his work won't
Or
be
humans.
Uh-huh.
right, or humans
Yeah.
or anything like that. So 800,000 years into the
Yeah.
future.
And it's
is
really
easy
more
to
like
work with.
him making this sort of social commentary on like the
Mhm.
rich and the poor and the dynamic between the two. So
Right. It was
you know,
great
he doesn't
themes,
have to
great messages.
accurately try to predict anything,
Right.
as long as he can tell the story he's
So
trying
we
to tell.
see in these movies too that they did attempt to, as many movies do, like Back to the Future or something like that with Marty McFly, is predict like the near future, and then we can now watch back on that and say that's not anything close to what it was, and it just dates the movie really badly.
Yeah.
Whereas the book is timeless because there's no way to prove it. Right? It's
Yeah.
impossible, and no one will ever prove it because it's
Yeah.
800,000 years into the future.
Yeah.
And no one's work is gonna
Yeah.
last that long.
And it's
So-
almost, it's just not far fetched. It's just not like, I mean, if you really like get into science and stuff like that, like he's thinking about like really how could we evolve? How could we degrade? So instead of thinking about a future like every futuristic movie does, is thinking that we're gonna have flying cars and like crazy stuff, Wells was actually like, let's think about in the future we're actually gonna degrade, like we're actually going to go downhill from here. So I really appreciated that about it, because it was much more realistic than expecting us to be able to be extremely advanced.
But one of the cool things in the book is whenever he's traveling through time and he sees the buildings getting higher and the city growing, and then it starts
to crumble.
Yeah, and that's so cool because he's not explicitly going to those times and seeing what it's like, so it's not dating anything, but he is saying it's going to get bigger and we're going to get more advanced, and then something may happen where
it all falls down.
Yeah.
And that's like one of the, like, another common thing between all the stories is that we have a and it doesn't happen in the book, but it happens in both movies, is that we have the time traveler go deep into the future, 800,000 years, and then interact with a homeostasis. Like this entire ecosystem has formed. It is nature. I mean, basically, there's not any difference between the Eloi and the Morlocks and animals, really, because one is a food source and one is the consumption, right? And they produce all the things, and they breed the Eloi, and they eat the Eloi, and they feed the Eloi, and the Eloi are just a food source at this point. And they're working completely in homeostasis. And as long as the Uber Morlock is like making things work, this is going to continue forever, until he like transcends with his neurological capabilities and like turns into like a fifth dimensional being or something.
Something like that.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
And they suggest that there are more than just the one Uber Morlock.
Yeah, but there was something at the end that I was like, okay, maybe they all got destroyed. You know?
Yeah, I think that's what happens.
Well, so that was what I was going to say, is that we have this homeostasis in nature, and then the time traveler comes and wrecks it. Destroys it.
He's really just...
Here's this perfect ecosystem that has like balanced itself out, and then the time traveler's like, no, my 1800 morals will not stand for any of this.
Yeah.
And then he murders everybody.
Which it's kind of that way in the book, where he doesn't know like who shot first or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
It's only because the Eloi look more human that he sympathizes with them.
Well, he only attacks the Morlocks in the book whenever they attack him first. And he's the only one that's hurting them or anything. And like, it's not like he kills off their entire species like he did in the
the
earlier
2002
one. Like in the 1960s one too. They just kill all the Morlocks.
Right, that's what I'm saying. He travels into the future and just
society.
destroys the ecosystem.
Yeah.
And it's weird. And so he gets down into the cage.
Yeah, he gets her out of the cage, and he's about to get her out of the cage, and then he encounters the Uber Morlock, which is this big brain boy that is going to go on this villainous monologue and explain to Alexander, the time traveler, how they ended up the way that they are. So we received a little bit of information from Vox, the AI librarian, about how these two races developed. But now we get into details about the Morlocks from the Uber Morlock. He says that they developed and evolved into different classes of subraces of Morlocks, ones that have developed specifically for hunting and specifically for breeding or specifically for whatever, and that he specifically was like the big brain guy. His cerebral capabilities, his intellect are to such a point that he can control dreams and he can control individuals, both Morlock and Eloi, and make them do whatever he pleases. Yeah. So this is how he explains that the ecosystem is maintained, and that if he was not doing his mind control tricks on the Morlocks, that they would expire the food system, the food supply, the Eloi, within a couple of months. So that is the interaction between them. And I feel like there was a part of me that when I watched that, I was like, this is kind of cool.
Yeah.
I was like, that's kind of cool. I mean,
Well, it's funny too because he tells him like, "Here, you've got your answer. You can't go back and save her because you invented the time machine." Like what we said earlier.
right.
You invented the time machine because she died. So going back and saving her would stop you from doing that. It's a temporal paradox.
Right.
That's just not something that can be fixed.
Which is so interesting too, because now we in almost, this is one of the interesting things that is not as unique to itself throughout the other two stories, the book and the 1960s movie, is that we now have come into contact with the highest intellect of all the stories. He
Yeah.
has the answers. Like that Uber Morlock can access his memory bank and then say, "This is the answer to your life right now that you've been searching for."
Well, and this is like what you said about this perfect ecosystem. He gives him the answer he's looking for and tells him, "Just get back in your time machine and go."
Yeah.
And go back to your own time. You got your answer, dude. And he does not do that.
He, like a true villain,
He actually
he
physically
spites his
fights him.
enemy.
Yeah, he grabs him and pulls him into the time machine with him.
He deceives him too, like through deception. This was like a
He, like, tricks
sneaky
him, yeah.
sucker punch of a move from the
It's-
time traveler.
It's so
It
funny
really
because he
is.
turns it on and the guy starts aging and his hands are still inside the time machine choking him.
Yeah, they're fighting. It's like, man,
The
this is a
worst
Hollywood
fight.
movie fight if I've ever seen one.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
He gets punched at one point. The time traveler does, Alexander, and he does like this triple spin and then
Yep.
falls. It's like, what is
rough.
going on here?
It was a terrible
and
fight.
the Morlock is like
Oh my God.
7 feet tall or something. I don't
He's
know. They
pretty
show
big.
that he's big compared to a normal man, and
But
he's
I
got a
did feel like
gross
he
spine
had
and
way too many fighting capabilities for being a big brain Morlock.
yeah, he doesn't
Or
need to do
no,
any
Yeah,
of
he
this.
wouldn't need to
Just
do.
a
I would
professor
doubt
at
he could even
Columbia.
like get
He
up
would
out of
have
his
to-
chair. To be honest with you, like I would think that he just like sits and like the other Morlocks feed him. Or
He-
Maybe
something.
he's just
he moves
tapping
stuff
into
with
their
his
like
mind.
savagery with his mind.
Yeah.
Didn't he like have some like telekinesis or something? Like, and he moved.
Does he
something
actually
with his
move
mind?
Yeah, he
anything?
does.
Yeah,
he has
so
a
I'm like-
telekinesis. He can like use the Force,
Yeah,
like Star
what?
Wars
And
style.
he basically like pushed him. Yeah, he pushed the time traveler at some point. And I'm like, what is this? Like, I don't understand.
He's
what's going
basically a
on.
god. Like this
They-
is what the Morlock is. He's basically just a low
He's
level
Emperor
god.
Palpatine.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
like a really
Yeah.
off-brand Palpatine.
But yeah, when he kills the
The-
Uber Morlock,
It was so funny. So he's choking him, and the time machine starts to do its like force field on the outside and whirring, and he starts to age, but his hands like stay like perfectly fine.
Yeah.
because
And he
they're
falls
within
off.
the what
Like,
do you call it?
the
bubble
bubble. Yeah.
of time.
And
So that's like my
his-
question. How did he, what is his experience? Like, what does he experience being in between?
I don't understand. Like,
Because
I
that
don't
means
know.
he's
He
stuck
just-
in that position for like 100 years.
and then
Something
Like
like
until
that.
he dies and he's just watching his hands stay the same age.
I don't. Yeah,
That'd
like,
be
what does that make sense?
horrifying.
And then he
I don't
just
know.
ages really fast.
He probably
Um,
couldn't even see his hands anymore because they would
Was
be
he just
like
there
a-
for 100 years?
Up
Right,
to
his
like
hands would just disappear and then he would be stuck there.
I mean, it
No.
doesn't. It would imply that he is there for a while because you
can
see him like
age and decay.
and decay.
But like how the time machine moves, because it's in the same position and it's just moving through time. And like in the book, they saw the blur of it like moving through time.
Right.
And so wouldn't he, if he's standing in the same spot for like 90 years, wouldn't he just like be stuck and he can see his hands maybe? Or like as a blur and he's like
No,
aging and his hands
You
never
couldn't
age?
see your hands. So he would, so wherever the sphere ends, it would cut his arms off from sight, at least. They would
Yeah.
still be in that position, in that space, but in a different space and time.
So he's
So
probably
the
just
time
like,
machine-
why can't I move?
The time machine and his arm, that portion of his hands would disappear.
well, it also.
But he
that would
could.
im-
There's no
Slip off
reason
like a
someone,
necklace
another
and
Morlock,
just
couldn't come
throws
by
him out.
and he'd be like, "Yo, Morlocks, come freaking help me! I'm stuck right now." And then them like grab them and pull them back.
yeah.
But
And
then
it-
what would happen to his arms? Because that
And-
portion of his arms are gone.
Okay,
they're-
and here's another plot hole. The Alexander comes back and saves Mara, and like, wouldn't the Morlock still be there, like stuck to the time
yeah, he
machine?
kills the
transporting-
guy by doing that, and then travels right back to her to save her from the
he
cage.
would still be around.
I don't think that he would even age. like to death in that one position, I think as soon as any part of him exited the time machine sphere, he would just get cut
But
into
it
a
looked
million
like he
pieces.
was flying and like
because
hanging off.
because it's constantly traveling in time, and your body is moving. So say it takes
It's
like
just
1
part of
second
his
to
body,
fall
though.
out of the sphere. It takes however many microseconds for that time machine to be changing
Gone.
positions in time. So however fast the time machine is moving in time, it would slice you into bits.
I would
Because
think
now
so.
you're changing positions in time. I don't know.
Couldn't a Morlock just come by and like cut his arms off at the elbows?
If he didn't just like dissolve by falling out, like Maverick was saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
It's weird. It just kind of looked like he was hanging, like the time machine was flying,
with
and the Morlock was like hanging on.
Also,
Till his arms fell off.
The time traveler has like one old portion of himself because he dropped that locket.
yeah, and he reaches down to grab
Yeah.
it, and his fingernails grow real long.
Yeah.
And the whole like rest of the movie, I'm thinking he's still got those like claws on his hand.
Yeah, he can use them.
He's still doing
He
stuff
starts, like,
with those
killing the
long
Morlocks
nails.
with like digging his nails into their face.
Pulling,
my God.
pulling
It
their
was, like,
eyes out.
Slits their throat
ridiculous.
with his nail.
So this ridiculous fight unfolds, and he ends up winning against the Uber Morlock, regardless of logic or reason, and
Travels back in time.
Travels back in time, and before that happened,
but
or-
the Uber
but
Morlock
just
is
after,
not there.
But just
Oh, it must have been right after
Yeah.
he disappeared.
right.
It makes no sense.
How would that
Sometime,
make-
but
it
then
makes no
he's
sense as a
dissolved
plot hole.
still. I don't know. He travels back to
Oh,
some
when he
point.
gets to the future, he sees that there's like
They destroyed
rusted
everything.
skies
Yeah.
and the whole
Morlocks have
world
taken
is a
over.
wasteland. The Morlocks, so it's not as balanced as you might have thought. So he realizes, okay,
Right, well,
I need
now
to
it's
get
not
back.
balanced because he killed the Uber Morlock.
I think,
Yeah.
oh yeah, that's he's the one who messed it all up.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
He kills the
time traveler
leader.
Screwed it all up.
It's never made clear if there's just one Uber
He
Morlock.
said-
There must have only
He
been
said
one
no.
because
He said there are many of us. I remember
Yeah, he said there's
this.
like
And
it
he
says on Wikipedia there's a cast of them.
Oh no, the casts were there are some of us who are the hunters, so they're saying like casts
Right.
as in classes. So
Yeah.
they're saying like there's the hunters, there's the ones that shoot the darts, and then there are the Uber Morlocks, and he said there are many of us.
It says the Uber Morlocks are a cast of telepaths who rule the other Morlocks.
What?
yeah.
So there was a whole like gang of them. And
Either
in
that
these
or it's just like
underground networks.
after one dies,
or
another
if
one-
every Uber Morlock is connected to each other,
Yeah.
then
Maybe
if you
so.
kill one, you kill the rest.
It's crazy. It just feels like we're rehashing a completely different story. than
And
what
why
it
are
was.
we
know.
exactly? And
Well-
why are we having to rationalize all this science fiction for the story? I'm
It's
tired of
terrible.
I
it.
know.
But yeah, he completely throws this world out of balance.
It's terrible.
He kills that
he's
guy,
a
and he's like,
villain.
"Well, I got to go back and kill the rest of them now because if I
Yeah.
don't, then
And he's-
everything goes
right.
to shit."
And then he does this.
sacrifices his time.
It doesn't make any sense how this even results in a massive explosion, but maybe it does with the power source that never runs out for this time machine.
has something to do with like, what does he do? He sets the locket in there, and it's gonna jam eventually.
Yeah, one of the cogs.
Oh yeah, he drops it
cogs,
in there and
yeah.
it stops and then it explodes.
and it
It's
sends like a
Michael Bay movie.
shockwave of killer time
Yeah.
that causes anything in its path to rapidly age, and so it wipes out all the Morlocks, and it like their little metal skull face tops of their wells that they live in just suddenly rust and like fold in on
Yeah.
each other.
And you can kind of see it like a spider web. Like they zoom out from the jungle and you can see it like spreading like this blue whatever. So underground, like all of their tunnel systems are collapsing. So that's why I think that he killed all the Morlocks.
Yeah,
And they somehow
this-
like magically travel like 50 miles
I was gonna
away
say
from
this
the
is like
explosion.
the end of Predator, where there's like a nuclear bomb that goes off, and Arnold somehow runs like 50 miles
Exactly.
or 100
Yeah.
miles away from this thing before it goes off in 5 minutes.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And then
stays
he
with the
lives
girl.
happily ever after.
And he's like, "This is my home now." And then they go back in time, and they give so much substance to Philby and Mrs. Watchet.
yeah.
Watch it.
Watch
Watch
it.
it, yeah.
Watch it.
Hey, watch it.
So,
Oh yeah, and Vox in the future becomes like the teacher for the little kids,
Right.
teaching them English and about the past and reading them stories
And so you get to see like that there's hope for the future of the
of
Eloi,
the human race
and
like,
the human race gets to
in
restart,
general.
and they're gonna become educated in English, and the world
Boring.
is gonna restart at some point.
Obviously, though, it
We
doesn't
didn't
And
get that
Alexander,
kind
the
of
time
in the
traveler, is
future.
gonna have some hot Eloi to go to bed with, and that's the
This
end
woman
of
does not wear a bra throughout this whole movie.
never.
And I think she's just wearing like a chainmail top or something.
Yo,
so
I was
it's-
thinking that. I
You're,
was like,
watching it, like,
I was watching it. I was like,
I mean, I saw this
are
movie
these her
originally when I
boobies?
was like,
I was like, are these boobies I'm seeing?
I was gonna say, I think I saw this movie when I was 12 the first time, so I definitely noticed like these are boobies that I'm seeing here.
I was so confused. I was like, I think they're boobies, but I can't see the nipples. Like, are they there? Anyway, that's the end of
And
the.
Philby tosses his bowler hat in the past to show
Because-
that he's given up on conformity too.
or because at the
Wow.
beginning he was like,
Thank God we got that
he
little
was
There
you
you
telling-
go.
He
in
was
cap.
crazy.
Yes.
Yeah, because the whole movie he has this resentment for bowler hats so bad, and he's like, "What's the time that you're like?" The little boy's like, "Sir, what was it like in your time?" And he's like, "Everybody wore these ugly hats."
Identical bowler hats.
Oh,
They're just dumb black
bowler
things.
hats.
Gosh, I hated it.
I was like, "What is this?"
I do think the music in this movie is pretty good.
I don't know. It was hard.
Like
It,
the
if it
Eloi
was-
chanting music and stuff, like when it kicks off at the end and Philby's throwing his hat and it just kicks in with the Eloi drumming. And
if it
like,
was good, I didn't notice it.
Yeah, the
I-
movie
okay,
just
I-
made me
I
want
like
to
the
die the
glass
whole
guy.
time.
Like how like there was glass and you could only see him. Or
Vox.
I like
Yeah.
that.
Vox
Thought
was
it was
cool.
cool.
He was an alright
He-
character. He was pretty sarcastic, pretty characterized. I mean, he did a good job.
Unnecessary.
for the kind of movie they were making,
They're probably one
He's
of the
great.
best characters in the
Yeah.
whole show. Like,
Yeah.
honestly, was Vox.
Yeah.
So that was the 2002 Time Machine movie,
Awful.
and
directed
it
by
was
Simon Wells,
not
great grandson
good.
of
the
H.G.
great
Wells.
grandson. Oh
Man,
my gosh.
what a way to just ruin your
It's
Spit on
legacy.
your
Yeah.
relative's grave.
it's the LaCroix of movies.
yeah.
It's
It's like rather you would think either that person would they would faithfully adapt it, like of
Yeah.
all things they would faithfully adapt that story, but it seems like he took this approach of
Man,
like,
they
well, it's
could've
my
done
family's
it
thing,
well.
so I can do whatever I want with it, and I want to change it
Yeah.
into something totally different and cool.
They could have
Very
done it
off-brand.
really well because
Yes.
like
brand.
Yes.
there were
Target
movies
brand
made
time
in that
machine.
time that were
Yes.
good and had good effects and weren't god awful.
Yeah. I mean, like
what
I
year
said,
was
Count
Lord
of
of the
Monte
Rings made? It
Count of
was
Monte
made pretty
Cristo came out
early.
this same year, and
Yeah.
that movie looks so much better.
It cost $8 million to make this movie.
Did they make their
$8
money
million.
back in the box office?
I doubt it.
I don't know.
Probably made $2 in the box office.
All these
I
old
hope
people
no
are
one
like,
saw it.
awesome. I love this movie. Little
Let's-
Wrens of the past. So
I was just happy to see boobies.
So I guess we can go
It
ahead
did
and
make its. It kind of made its money back. I would
Did
say,
break even?
yeah, because the budget was 80 million, and then it's
Oh,
usually
80
like
million.
half of that for advertising and stuff. So that's 120 million, and the movie made 123.7 million.
That's, they
Oh
barely
my
broke
God,
even.
They
Yeah.
did.
nobody
So-
actually got paid to do it.
Yep. In the end, it just wasn't worth it.
They got paid pennies. So, okay, I guess we can move on from the 2002 film onto the 1960s film, which is going to be much better to discuss because
It's
It was-
much more faithful.
so much more faithful.
So much more faithful.
Still
but
wasn't
Still
good.
wasn't good.
Whoa! Pump the
Whoa,
brakes, you
yeah.
two.
Hold
Okay.
up. Pump the brake. Yes, seriously. Pump those
Pull your
brakes.
Was I
lever
watching
back.
a different
Holy,
movie
Jake
than
break
we
that,
watched the
okay?
same-
Because
Did we
I
all
like
watch
this
the
movie.
Same movie
I-
because it was
listen,
not good.
I
This
watched
movie
it.
is awesome.
I watched it 2 hours ago, and
I
it was
did
great.
too.
It's a fun time.
Okay, at
What?
first, okay, we start off the movie, and I'm like, yes, I love old movies. It's just like Lord of the Flies. They keep true to the movie, and I was so
To the book.
and I was so happy about it. But I soon realized that they rushed things, and they really added in. Oh God, like me. what's her face? Weena? I'm like losing her name
Weena.
now.
Weena.
Okay.
Weena.
So we'll cover the later
Just like
stuff
the
when we
worst.
get there. So we'll try and retell the story as it happens.
So bad.
The movie begins
I have some strong
and
opinions.
immediately it's a breath of fresh air because I watched the 2002 movie last night.
I split.
And it was wretched. And then I watched watched
Wretched.
this one. I watched this one this morning, and it was such a good time. I was having a fun time just right when it was starting, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is
Well, at
looking
the
good. It's a
beginning-
classic type movie. It's
You've got,
almost exactly like the book so far."
Rod Taylor playing
An American
the time
playing an
traveler.
Oh
English
yeah.
Yeah, that was the
His
one
accent
weird
was
thing is
bad.
he's got an American accent
Yeah.
and he's a British guy though.
Yeah, it was
It's
a bit,
like-
and every once in a while he did have those empty R's. Every once in a while,
Yeah,
he
okay,
wouldn't
yeah.
he would have the empty
Which
R's.
is more like a non-regional accent that they
Right.
use in old movies
So-
than it is.
It was
like-
almost, but it didn't even sound to me like what is it called, the South and Eastern Atlantic accent that they created in early Hollywood.
Yeah,
Yeah,
to try and
still the
merge
60s.
English and
What is it?
American
transatlantic.
transatlantic accent.
It's
Yeah.
just it was an American trying to do an English accent, and he sometimes did it, and sometimes
Yeah.
he didn't. So he didn't commit to it,
Oh,
Which is
which
funny,
takes
his-
away.
His like last role that he ever did was in Inglorious Bastards by Quentin Tarantino. He plays Winston Churchill, who's like the most British person
Right, and does
for
a
just
great
one
job.
scene.
I didn't
yeah,
know
For
he
that
was
one?
in that
That's
movie.
He
that's
is old,
gross.
old,
That's
old.
such a good
Yes.
movie.
And
So-
That is.
he was also in The
huge growth.
Birds. Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. He's like the
I need to watch that.
love interest in that. He's really good.
So I think he was, first of all, was much better cast. I don't like the main guy in the other one. He just looks weird. Like in 2002, I was like,
I
don't
like
know.
him.
thought he was
I like
kinda
him in
cute.
things.
He looks so much
he's-
different on the cover
know,
of the
okay.
DVD, like the poster.
Really?
Yeah,
looks
like
like-
he looks like a handsome ass lad in the
Listen,
cover, and
okay.
I was like, bro, what is this, like a Keanu Reeves lookalike, like on the cover? And then I'm
Really?
watching it, and I was like, this schmuck is not getting this hot girl. Like his fiance, way hotter than him. I
Oh,
was
yeah,
like, this
Emma?
is
He's a
yeah. I was
professor
like,
at
Emma
Columbia.
is
He's probably making
smoking.
those bucks. Like, you have no wealth back then. If you're a woman, like you have no wealth of your own, you have to marry somebody rich.
And so-
Man, she
Anything.
looked like she probably came from a wealthy family though, with
Her nice dress.
that all red outfit. She was
Yeah.
stunting
I got it
on
from
everyone.
Macy's. Do you remember that part? She's like talking about her hat. And
Mhm.
I just got it from Macy's.
That's awesome. I like that
Macy's.
one.
Mhm.
But the beginning of the movie is awesome because it just starts out exactly like the book does,
Mhm.
which
Yeah.
is with him, everyone coming over.
It was
He's
a
late
little
for
bit flipped.
dinner.
It was a little bit flipped.
What did they flip?
When we first meet the time traveler, like he shows the clock first disappearing, and talks about the fifth dimension. Like, let's talk about the fifth dimension. But you start off with them all waiting on him for dinner, and they're like, he's late. And they're, ooh, one thing I saw though, there were a ton of clocks in the old one and the new one.
Yeah.
yeah,
like,
Yes.
they
just
kind
a
of stick
ton
with
of
this.
clocks.
Even more
Clock
clocks in the old
focused.
one.
It's like a
Yes.
little diner you might pass on the road somewhere, and that's their shtick. Is
Mhm.
just like
Yeah.
There's a
having
lot of clocks.
Yeah,
clocks everywhere.
clocks
on the walls.
everywhere.
So they were waiting on
Set
him.
designer
and dinner.
really went to town on the clocks.
Mm.
Yeah. And also they merged the characters. So like H.G. Wells is our narrator. Or that's what we assumed, like reading the book. And
And in this, he's his own narrator,
He's
so
his
they
own
just decided to
narrator.
call him George.
yeah. And he's George. And then there's Philby,
Which
who
is-
becomes a bigger character than he actually was.
Which is one of the biggest decisions that they make to
In both
alter the
movies.
original story. But they did it. I think they did it so much better in the 1960s.
Oh,
is
for
establish a really deep friendship
Yeah.
between Philby and George, the time traveler.
Did
Yeah.
you guys notice that every once in a while he just have these like long monologues? Like these just
The time
long-
traveler?
Yes.
Well, that's
the time
another
traveler
big
just, like, go
difference
off.
is that he is like narrating the story
Right.
from the get-go in this. So all of the exposition from the
Mhm.
book is pretty much included in this story, just summed up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Which
it
I think-
lifts a lot of lines.
I-
Yeah,
directly
and
from
it's
the
definitely
book.
a 1960s movie in character too, because it's in pacing and in editing and cutting.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds just like a 1960s movie. I mean, it was
And
very
set
classical.
design.
Yeah, very
It's
classical.
got that future sci-fi like 60s style.
Oh
and
yeah,
I love it.
It's very. I love it. It's
reminded
great.
me a lot of the Twilight Zone. So like whenever he's traveling
Mhm.
and you know the mannequin, they had to do that for a point of reference. I kind of get it, but also I thought it was dumb because it would have been cooler to either just do like a little claymation set of seeing like buildings crumble and
They
grow.
did
or
plenty of
whatever.
claymation.
Yeah, but
Yeah, they did with
Oh,
that
boy, that's
Morlock's
probably-
Yeah,
body.
they did.
That's probably the roughest looking like effects
The
that just
roughest
haven't
ones.
aged well when they use miniatures and
Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't know.
They're so
I'm a
funny, though.
I'm a really big fan of. I mean, it was 1960, and I'm a really big fan of like the Evil Dead. That's even a newer one, but their claymation
Yeah.
is worse than
oh yeah.
than anything in the time machine.
I think they had less of a budget too, though.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, like none.
Yeah.
yeah.
Didn't they
Um,
use like it was either claymation or it might have been a drawing or something in the Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Yeah, I mean,
Whenever he
for
goes
me,
in that cave, it
they
was
do
like
animations.
a drawing, right?
Mhm.
for
oh,
me,
yeah, that was amazing.
older movies to me strike because you have to like realize the evolution of like storytelling for like these different like if whether it's a book or stage play or a movie. Like stage play, they were transitioning from stage to film, so they were just like, well, we can just put the story of the stage onto film. And then they were mixing a lot of different Chekhov techniques, which is like realism and like taking your stories and then putting them into real environments like a house and then making it seamless. And so they just used those techniques. They were coming over from Russia into the film whenever it started, like early like 1920s or whatever. And
Yeah.
so
France.
that's so yeah, right. So whenever I watch these older films, even 1960s fairly new, that's just what I feel like is that it doesn't bother me that much, the claymation or even the Eloi whenever they have like, you know, lacking like makeup effects
Yeah,
or something
I don't
like
get
that.
upset about stuff
Because
like
to me, it's a play, and they
Yeah.
represent things, and so
And
you
they
just have to
didn't have-
understand this is what's happening.
And it's kind of a time capsule
Yeah.
of
Right.
like what
and they didn't
we
have
were
the
capable of.
resources
Exactly,
to do a lot
yeah.
of stuff like that. I understand that. I feel like the least important thing about time is women's fashion. Like, I mean, seriously, like, I know it's like cool, but like that was the one thing they were showing, and they were like, oh, he was watching the lady dress, and they were like, oh, that dress. He was like, is that even a dress anymore? And like the
Yeah.
dress is getting shorter.
I
and
think it's
shorter.
kind of a clever way to show the passage of time, but also it's very cheesy in the way
It's
that
too
it's
easy.
done.
I mean,
And
if
it's
I wanted
like you
to
hear
save
the little building block or the xylophone noise or whatever.
Yeah,
for
yeah.
ding, 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 ding,
They
ding,
did do
ding.
the candle melting in both movies. They did the clock whirring
Mm.
and the candle melting, which I was like, that's cool. That's fine because
Yeah.
that's like
well,
very
if I ever
believable.
wanted to do passage of time and felt like there wasn't enough for that sequence, and I wanted to save money and labor, I would definitely go with the mannequin, because all we have to do is take a bunch of stills and put clothes on, take clothes off, put the clothes on, take the clothes off. You don't even
Yeah.
have to move the camera. You
That's
just keep
true.
it there. And it's like, how long would that take? Not long
That's
at all.
true.
So if I really wanted to be like, we have some money to spend, we should put it toward the story, we need to fill some stuff. do
Yeah.
it. So
I really thought this movie was solid until Weena comes along, and I'm like, I hate this.
It
little
really
awkward.
started
Okay, so-
going downhill
so-
when he was in the future.
So in the story,
Yeah.
where are we? We have
Oh,
we
God,
just
I
started
hated
at the beginning of the story.
Yeah,
so
we haven't really gotten
we haven't
into
summarized.
it.
So we'll do the summary from memory. If you guys want to fill in anything that I miss, we start with the story. All of his friends. These are different, like more like
Prominent men.
figures: doctors, journalists, scientists, fellow scientists. Professors at the college
Isn't
or
it
whatever.
like New Year's Day or something?
It
too?
is.
Okay,
Not yet.
but it's about to turn New
Maybe
Year's
it
Day.
is. Yeah, it is New
Okay.
Year's Day, and then it happens.
Or is that the remake when they have it's New Year's?
I don't think it's New Year's.
I
in
know
the
it's
old
snowing
one.
outside. I do remember that.
It is New
and-
Year's. It is New Year's. So his friends
New
come over. His
Year's.
prominent figure friends come over. He's late for dinner, so they receive a note from the time traveler that in the event that he's 8 minutes late or more, that they should continue on with the dinner, whether he's there or not. And so they do so, and then he stumbles in, all
This
messed
is-
up, right?
I think this is the second time they come over.
Okay, the first time.
Because the first
The
time
first time he
he
shows them
shows
the
them
clock,
the little-
He shows up,
the little
and then-
model. It's
right.
a model of
Oh,
the
was
actual
it?
time machine.
Oh, okay.
He shows them the model time
Disappears.
machine, this tiny one.
And I
It
do-
disappears. No one believes him. They discredit him. They
Yeah.
say that's a fancy
They're like,
magic
"Oh,
trick.
nice
Doesn't
trick,"
he
and
show
they
them
leave.
the actual time machine?
No.
No, he doesn't. It was just
He
a
showed
model of it.
someone.
And then
I thought,
I
like
love
he looks into the room. And he's
That
like,
Philby sticks around. He thinks the room is empty, and he starts starts
Right.
like packing stuff up and writing letters, and then Philby's like, George.
I know.
I know.
In the
I
chair.
was so
And these two do such a good job acting like
Yeah.
you immediately believe this friendship.
Yeah.
As like
Yeah.
these
They
two guys
sell
care
it.
about
I
each
did
other.
like it. I did like it and enjoy it. It was really heartwarming to see like how it progressed like over time and like what that meant to him.
Yeah.
So instead of like an extreme love interest, which there was a little bit of a love interest in the story, it was based on a friendship too,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and I like
Well,
that.
and that- 'cause
gave
I
it
think
more,
that- It was a decision they made in an attempt to anchor the time traveler back to his own time.
yeah,
Because
make it
there's a
more
lot
neat.
done in the book that we get to hear through narration that he like misses his own time or whatever, and it means a whole lot to him, or how much it weighs on him to be gone, or think that he'll never go back. And so we never get to really see that much in the movie, because how would we convey that necessarily through his like own inner monologue without just droning on for too long? And so
Yeah.
we create this friendship that they sell really well, and then that kind of like substantiates his relation to his own time.
Yeah.
And I think they did a very good job of that. In addition, the two actors were great together. I mean,
Yeah.
they seemed like it was like class A bromance.
They did get together again and shoot like a little mini, like a skit that's like works as a sequel to the story.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Like they did it years later. I think it's like a bonus
watch
feature on the DVD, but I watched it years ago and I did not rewatch it whenever I was doing this.
I got to try and find that, see if it's on YouTube or something like
Yeah,
that.
I think
That's
it
cool.
is.
That would be awesome to
Yeah.
watch, because first of all, I just love that he's Scottish. First
Right?
of all,
Yeah.
like I just loved his accent. I thought it was
Oh,
so
yeah.
There
good.
was did they mention a red-haired man in the book?
Yeah.
So they
I think they say it's Philby
it's
who
Philby
is
a red-haired
redheaded.
man. Oh, I like that they stayed true to the story there.
But is Philby like his buddy in the book though, or is
I
he
think
one of the
Philby's some
detractors?
random dude, because the narrator in the book is more of his friend, and the narrator in the book is supposed to be H.G. Wells.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
so
there's
I
not
think
really
I think-
necessarily a friendship between the narrator
They
and the
just
time traveler in
kind
the book.
of are.
But he was the one that
nice
went back
to
and
each
was
other?
like, "Where is he?"
Right.
And he had more of a connection with him, and
Yeah.
he was the one that believed him.
Mm-hmm.
So just like I think that they just had to combine it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They just had to combine them, and I think it was a good decision. Like, I mean, you can't just call him.
It was the one thing that they did to establish what I was saying with his like him and his time, and then it justified for me his trip shortly into the future,
Mm-hmm.
which he does later on. So
It was a little rushed. So like when he comes in, he's like, "I have to tell this story," and he was like, "Remember when y'all were here?" And then it just dives right into the story. Where like in the book, it was like, "Come closer, let's turn down the lights," and like everybody's sitting down, like leaning forward, like, "Yeah,
And he
tell me this
eats and
story."
he showers and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
again, that's more for like cinematic purposes.
which they
Yeah.
did that a little bit, because he was all messed up whenever he comes back, and then he takes a shower and then he's fine.
Does
and
he
then he
actually
tells
take
the
a shower
story.
in the movie?
Yeah, well, and it's not shown, but he's all like messed up and bloody and cut, and his clothes are soiled, and then it says, "I'll tell you everything about it," and then they stand up, and then it cuts, and then he's fine, and he's like
Yeah.
dressed, and his hair's wet and everything.
Nice.
So yeah, I think that was a good touch. But so he has all of his friends over. He shows them the model, disappears. They discredit him. Everyone leaves. They tell him Happy New Year. He's pretty disheartened about the whole situation because no one believes him. He doesn't really know. He heads back into his house to write some letters and realizes that his house is not empty. One of his guests has remained, and that's Philby. They have this really heartfelt conversation between one another. Philby wants to know, what's wrong, man? Just talk to me. And so they have this talk, and he kind of insists, the time traveler does, that he has the technology now to travel into time. And Philby doesn't know what to make of it, says that he should just come over to his house for New Year's to celebrate, because he hasn't seen his kids in a while. And so he turns Philby's
Philby
offer
mentions
down.
his young son.
Yeah.
He'd love to see you.
Right, because he hasn't
Oh,
seen him in
that's
so
important.
long. And so he turns Philby's offer down, and he leaves, and then after that he goes and time travels into the future. and he does a few experimentations when he does this to really test whether it's working or not. The pocket watch that's on him only travels a few seconds, while the clock
and this
front
is
of
all
him,
like his story that he's narrating to
yeah,
them.
and he narrates all of this as it's happening, and then he travels to 1917.
I think it's the
16.
I don't
Was
know.
it
Oh,
that-
it must be 1917 because
This is before World War One, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
And he sees like the British are getting ready to
It's on
go
the way to
war.
World War One. We're like there. We're like on the cusp. So and he
But
walks
his
out of
house has
his
cobwebs and
yeah.
stuff.
It's all cobwebs in his house. There's boards like a fence. Preventing anybody from entering the private premises, and so he leaves and walks across the street, and lo and behold, he sees Philby. So he says hi to him, says, Philby, you look so silly without your mustache, and discovers that this is not old Philby, senior Philby, but this is young Philby,
This
his
is
son.
his
His
son,
son,
who's
who's like,
now
"I'm James."
the age of his father, just about.
Right.
And I think he even says like, "You haven't aged a day," and then he like, "Of course you haven't, because you're not him."
Right.
And then his Philby's son, Phil Jr., I guess.
Yeah, Phil, young Philby.
He
James.
tells him that he
James Philby.
his dad died during like the early bombing of the war, something like that. Or on the front lines. Yeah, he was.
died.
And so
this is pretty heavy for the time traveler, and so George decides to go back, and he time travels again, this time considerably into the future to like
he goes a little
1960,
farther.
right?
Oh yeah.
Like all the way to 1960?
Yeah, he goes to 1960, and then he sees
The war is still going on.
Old James Philby, and
This might be, it's farther ahead than 1960 because that's when this movie came out.
it's at least in like maybe
I think it's like
the 70s.
1970s.
1970, yeah.
Because they have
Because
like
they're having
future looking
stuff.
suits a little bit.
They're
thought
kind
it
of
was
having
gonna
like
be
the
futuristic
Cold
in
War
the
scares
70s.
right now, or like the Korean War and the atomic bomb stuff going on, because you can see it in both movies, like how they perceive the future to be, because there are all the sirens going on. Everybody's like, you need to run, we got to get out of here, because they're so concerned about
Air raid sirens.
Which is a big theme and message tool in the 1960 movie,
because
the sirens.
It is more fear-inducing for them, because they're at that time, they're having to hide underneath their desks and stuff like that.
And this is where he's kind of ignorant at the time too. The time travel George, where he's just like, well, I just got here. You know?
Exactly.
You know, the war's still going on. Come on, let's hang out. And it's like, dude, people are clearly running in a panic.
there was a guy in
Exactly.
like a silver spacesuit.
This is like that 1960s aesthetic
Yeah.
where he looks like Dr. Evil from Austin Powers when they're in the volcano lair.
Oh my god.
I like it, but also this strays from our story. Like, I know why it's being used. I understand the tool of it, but like it strays from like how the book actually was. And I crave a book or a movie that would stay really close to the book, because it is such a good book.
Especially
the
a
way
book
that
like that it would be interesting enough to just make a book that was an exact adaptation and didn't take like creative liberties.
It's just one part of the book that nobody ever questions, because in the book, the time traveler goes forward in time on his machine and then stops once and then decides to just send it. Like, he just goes all the way, like 800,000 years immediately, and we never question it all that much in the book. There's no reason for it. It's just, and it's never
rush
like
things, but it would leave more time to create the climax, which they messed up in the 1960s movie.
Yes.
They completely just broke apart like
So
I think what they did
like,
with the
point of it.
time traveling, the way they did, is that they tried to justify or motivate his travel, which I think they effectively did, if that's what they were looking for, because he goes and he travels, and just like anybody, I mean, I would assume that the time traveler would want to just advance in his future pretty near to see what is coming for him, right?
It's kind of like and it's kind of like the 2002 version too, where they have the moon exploding. Well, in this, it's like bombs dropping because of
Right.
war, and it's like causing lava flowing and completely destroying the stability of the Earth
And
for a long time anyway. And
So they motivate his travel and the amount of travel that he was forced to do because the lava encased him, and he had to
and he was
travel
stuck
that
inside of
far
the mountain.
in order for
For it to wear away.
For it to
Yeah,
wear
for it
away.
to wear away.
So
I remember
as
that.
far as the motivation for like the distance of travel, like it really gave a reason for why he ended up 800,000 years in the future
Yeah.
rather than this arbitrary number.
I mean, he does have like this long monologue where he's like, I just want to pursue knowledge and bring it back. Like, I feel like from our book, like this guy is so excited to be time traveling already and seeing the days and nights pass but between him and seeing the civilization change around him, that's reason enough why he just kept moving forward, because it was so exciting.
well, and in the book
And-
too, he is like covered in darkness for a time and has to sit there and wait to see sunlight again before he can do something.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think what they wanted to do something cinematic and motivated, and they did it. But
Yeah.
either way, he ends up traveling really far into the future, like we just said.
The same distance.
800,000 years into the future, and he ends up just. I like that they did that. He was traveling too fast and stopped it too quick, and he
gets thrown off.
gets
of
thrown off, and the whole machine gets tipped over.
It. Yeah, it does. It looks kind of comical.
Yeah, it's kind
when
of
it
goofy.
happens.
I was gonna say that too. That his entrance for like whenever he comes back from the future was really comical. Like I thought that was just like the music and everything like that. And he was like, "Oh,"
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah, it was super
"That's
funny.
really
oh my
melodramatic."
God, it's like the scenery behind him. He's
Yeah. So
riding like that. It's so funny.
so he ends up being fine. He gets off of his time machine and starts exploring the wilderness, and then
He sees the Sphinx. That was
he
left
sees
out
the
of the
Sphinx,
2002
which was
version.
cool. Yeah, they said they did like this big scary metal contraption, metal skull head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Sphinx he looks at, it looks like the Morlocks in the 2002 version were almost based off of the way the Sphinx looks in the 1960s
Yes.
version.
Yes.
I agree. I was glad.
That's
I
true.
liked how the Sphinx looked.
It
Yeah,
looked,
it
it looked
looks
good.
different.
I liked
liked
how it looked because it was kind of how I imagined it, but green.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
was like, okay, like that works.
Which I think
for
they
me.
say in the book that it's green too,
I
or at
think
least
they
like
do.
I thought it was
the-
white
whatever
I
it's
think it
sitting
was
on is
green.
green because
okay.
of the
It was
moss.
like
well, because
onyx.
of it's copper or something.
Yeah,
I think
copper or whatever.
oxygenation.
Yeah. So so he starts exploring through the wilderness, and then he discovers like this different structure. He goes inside and finds all these tables.
Matte painting. It's awesome.
What is there a matte painting?
Yeah, when he finally sees like the dome buildings
Oh.
and stuff dotting the landscape.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just
yeah.
like clearly a giant painting that somebody's made to put there. But
Right.
I love matte paintings.
They're great.
Yeah,
They're good.
they-
So he sees all this, and he discovers like all these tables with like fruit on them and like plates, and he has this weird. It was kind of, I feel like, a bit of a waste of time. I feel like they shouldn't have done this,
He was
but he
banging
like
the
he's
plate.
like banging the plate on the thing and
And
like
it was like,
playing with the echo.
It's
It
echoing.
was supposed to be like,
Yeah.
I guess how empty it was or how big it was, but it was the door.
I mean,
was,
you
like,
could have
left
just done it
halfway open.
once. Like he could have just picked it up and put it down and like acknowledged the echo for
did
1
it a
second
bunch
and then
of
went
times.
forward. But he like did it a ton. He like spent like
It's interesting sound design.
yeah, it
Uh-huh.
was.
But
It was interesting.
yeah, it spends a little time with it when it's like just go.
Exactly. And so he gets tired of that and decides, well, I guess there's no one here, and so walks back out of the
I was
structure.
gonna say, I think he hears the play they're playing outside.
Well, he
Playing,
leaves, and then does he hear it from inside the structure?
I'm pretty sure.
Okay. He
Maybe-
hears
maybe not, maybe
he
not.
hears laughing and playing at some point, and
He was walking and then he hears it and he starts running like straight towards it, I think. And oh my gosh, it's all these like little Aryan babies with like bowl cuts. Like
Yeah.
it just super weird. They look like Rocky from like Rocky Horror Picture Show. Like all the dudes are like tan.
I
and,
thought
like,
they looked a lot better than the 2002 though, because they're all pale like in the book.
Yeah, they're
I-
a lot more faithful to the book.
They look feeble.
They all look like
they all look short.
young hippies.
Yeah.
almost.
I feel like they should have used children. Like
They should have.
and
And the only reason they didn't is so that they could make Weena a love interest in
Right.
this
Which
movie.
was
Oh, it's such a
cringy
weird
and weird.
love
Yeah.
It's
interest.
like you're just
Oh.
a simple little girl.
Oh,
and he's
whenever
like,
he said, you're just a kid. Do you have any adults here? And she's like,
and
then
no.
he keeps referring to her as a kid.
Yeah.
And then he's
pick a lane.
rubbing her face and stuff, and he's like,
what's your name? Weena.
And he's like, do you know how to spell that? And she's like,
That's the one thing I didn't like about either one of them is their
so
languages. So like
that they could talk. They
Yeah.
were fluent in English, and I was like, that makes no logical sense. That is 800 years in the future.
why would they
100,000,
still be
yeah.
speaking English?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Fluent,
weird.
nice English, like that. It sounds like that she's educated.
And
That's
she's
how
still very
speaking.
simple, so just make her speak
In like
Eloise
2 words
or
and
whatever.
sentences.
Eloise, yeah.
that
I mean, it
liquid
was
tongue.
Eloi or
sometimes-
something, yeah.
They tried to like have it 2 different ways where the Eloi didn't understand every word, but they also used big words and stuff.
Right.
And so he's like asking that one bowl haircut
I
dude,
hated that dude.
and he's
Yeah.
like, the Morlocks, or like saying everything about it, and then
Yeah.
he's like, and then
He keeps
suddenly
asking
he
him questions
mentions,
at
like,
dinner.
fire
Yeah.
or something, and she's like, what's fire? Or I don't
Like,
even
it's just
know.
weird
or, like,
stuff.
I
that
don't
they
think
know.
either. Like, I think it was
so
fine though because
stupid.
was there ever a point in which they said that they don't speak English?
Mm-mm.
Right. So they
No.
just
In the
speak
book?
English.
In the book,
I know, but I'm
don't
just saying,
know
like,
English in the
it
book.
was not as bad as in the 2002
They
movie
had their own
because
language.
they were like, we have our own language. No one speaks English here, and then every single person that ever talks in the Eloi in the
Speaks
2002
English.
movie speaks English. So I'm like, you just said you don't speak English, but
Well,
now you are speaking English.
yeah.
Well, they forget, but
But
maybe
now they
not
remember
all of it.
But they don't.
Yeah.
Now they
I
remember
don't, at
enough.
least there's an explanation for why they can still speak English in
Right.
the 2002
Yeah,
in
version.
the
just speak
old
English.
one, there's no reason that they don't speak a different language, except for the film writers just didn't want to have subtitles and make up
Or-
a dumb language.
or not
Yeah.
even. They didn't even need subtitles. Like she could have been like me, Weena, and like Tarzan.
Yeah, she could
stuff,
have been
like,
using
very
like 3
basic
words,
stuff.
3-word sentences.
They could have done that very easily, and I think it was just a misstep on their part because it made them look more intelligent than they actually were. Because
They're adults.
the way that Eloi was in this, like I was like, I don't even care. Why care if they're gonna be eaten by the Morlocks? They're dumb. Like I was like, I don't like them
Well,
as a race. I'm like, eat
they
them.
had
Oh
an
my God,
explanation
they're
for
so
this, right?
stupid.
Because they are larger than the Eloi in the book. They're basically full-grown adults. Most all of them. They're like 20 years old. Almost all of them. They look
Yeah.
like they
Yeah.
just look
Eloi?
shorter
Yeah.
20-year-olds.
Like a-
And so then you think about like, well, they could just defend themselves from the Eloi, right? And then we find out that the Morlocks don't take the Eloi by force. They have
Oh,
the
it was
siren.
The air raid siren.
And
The
that's
air
what I'm
raid
saying was
sirens,
dumb,
which
because they're so entranced by it.
Because the siren goes off and they're all just like walking. What? Why?
So this was
Why
a
does
so
that
this
make
was
sense?
this was a message, right? This was a theme. So they have this whole idea, the interpretation. This was a political commentary on like the
Yeah.
war and everything like that, right?
Yeah.
Clear.
How long will we live in fear that we will that for example the sirens will program us to our death, right? That we're just gonna the sirens are gonna go off, and what are we gonna do? We're gonna go below.
walk to our death.
We're gonna walk to our death, right?
Yeah.
And so that was a
Wow.
political commentary from the 60s on the wars that were going on and went on already. So that, I mean, it was very dated, I feel like, but I also understood
I
what
mean,
they
it
were
just
trying
doesn't
to
make any
convey.
logical sense that these
Right.
air
Okay,
raid
but-
sirens
but
would still
also,
exist.
like-
when
Right.
the air raid
At
sirens,
all.
Weena
Right.
was
But-
like kidnapped randomly, like you see,
But
like
it
this
was-
Well,
furry
before
arm,
that,
Yeah,
he,
that was so
they
dumb.
pull her into the woods,
yeah,
that was
when
weird.
they, oh man, that's
and then that's
it,
when
like
you hear
grabbed her mouth, and then you just saw her feet being dragged off.
yeah, they have and
And she
goes
he's
through
asking where the people
later.
went,
punches.
and they're like, oh, we don't talk about where they went, and he thinks, no, I need to get inside there because I think that's where my time machine's at, and just like the book. And so he and Weena are like camping out next to it, waiting
Weena
for something to
tells
come
him
out.
everything about their world and stuff, which like I thought was so dumb because in
Oh,
the
yeah.
book, like he grabs like 3 of them and is like shaking them,
Well,
trying
in
to.
the movie, he also though he does go into the room where all the books are,
Yeah.
because he
They
asks
just
the
expedited
guy,
But, like,
that.
and he
Weena-
grabs the books and they
And they
just
all
crumble
crumble.
into
Yeah.
dust,
Doesn't
and
that
he's
look
just
so satisfying?
super
he's-
angry.
yeah, he's pissed at this one dude.
Yeah.
And he
He's
gets really
angry.
mad
Shaking
at
him,
him.
about
He
to
like
knock his
reprimands him.
And
He's
then
like,
he
Yeah.
goes in that room and he tells them all that they're like a
He goes in there,
terrible
he was like,
group
"What
of
are you
people. and stuff.
doing?"
years of history and
just goes off-
achievement, and what have you done?
That's what I'm talking about. His like huge monologues, like the whole like anger thing, and he blames them. But like it makes me upset because he doesn't come to like these conclusions on his own. He's learning about these things from other
But
secondhand.
Weena just
Right.
tells him
Which-
everything about it. She's like, they're called Morlocks. They make our
Oh,
clothes.
yeah, guys.
They are our leaders.
the rings.
So
Rings were cool.
Okay, I
I thought
thought
the rings
so,
were cool.
but
I thought
also
they were okay.
the whole like thing of the crux of it was like that he was a scientist, he's an explorer, and he comes to these conclusions on his own
Yeah.
his own
I just think
intellect.
there's just so much monologue you can put in a movie. Like, you're just so much you can do with it
I think
before
it
it's
could have
too
been
much.
such a quick, simple sentence, and he's like, and I realized that the Morlocks were taking them. Like from what I've seen, I can understand like little like quibs.
Well, it
and
should
I
have been
like-
like
it
he
was
was
well, it
telling
was
the
really just
story
because they're
with
adding the
some-
love story, so they've got to have some back and forth between him and
Yeah.
Weena to establish some sort of love
They
connection.
I
had
agree,
no romantic connection. He was just calling her a kid the whole time, and then was like, "Actually, I want to make out with
I wanna
you."
kiss
Well,
It's
just
just
the
like,
only thing is
she
you're supposed
is
to
really
believe
hot.
it because she's a hot blonde
She's
woman.
really
Yeah.
hot.
Yeah.
So, like, I was like, as soon as she was introduced, I was like, damn, these Eloi are smoking. I was
They are-
like,
yeah, she's
look
a
at
good
this.
looking woman.
yeah. So, which
She
was,
gives the lady on the bicycle a run for her money.
oh, definitely. He's like, oh yeah, there we go.
And so yeah, the thing when they go to the old rundown museum, and he's like looking at different, I don't know, I think he sees
Ring
guns
messages or
There's-
whatever.
Again, it's like hammering home this war thing, and then yeah, it's not in the book at all. So it's a weird way that their like version of future tech of recording stuff is just him spinning like this little washer on
Yeah.
And it infinitely
light
up
spins.
table.
Blow-up
It just
table,
it
yeah.
spins until it's done playing, and then it
and then it'll
then it-
just drop
I mean,
like
drop.
the
that
top
would be
and
cool.
That would
That'd
be.
be a
Inception.
cool thing.
Yeah,
They picked him
yeah,
up.
exactly. I think it was interesting, but I feel like it was such a small thing too that it didn't really mess with like.
I would rather get information from him finding runes, finding that on his own, than having Weena tell him
Well, I
as
like
if she
that
was intelligent.
that
Yeah,
scene at
maybe.
least like gives him some information, which is better than what happens in the book, which is a whole lot of nothing.
Yeah, you don't
Except
have.
that-
We never definitively know in the book what
happened.
happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just his conjecture.
Yeah, it's literally he's saying like, I'm pretty sure this is it, but
But it's
Which-
like it's so dumb that Weena can come up with all these conclusions on her own, but she doesn't know what like fire is, and she knows all these other big words and stuff.
yeah, this
and she
ag-
like
again,
knows
it's just
that
like the seams of them shoehorning in
yeah,
this
and
love
she
story.
knows that the
Yeah.
Morlocks are like taking advantage of them and making their clothes and stuff just so they can be their leaders. When in the book, they're like they don't know anything about the Morlocks.
yeah.
They probably don't even notice that they're making their clothes.
And
Which
stuff like that.
I think when we discussed the book, I talked about like that was one thing with the book that never made any sense to me is like, how are the Morlocks smart enough to make clothing? Do they raise them in a nursery or something? At what point do they release them?
Mhm.
Like there were so many
Yeah.
unanswered questions
That's
Yeah.
true.
that you just don't ever get like a good idea of how that.
Why
could
do we
ever
never
have been
see any
possible.
infant Eloi?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
But the
Like we understand why there are no
Are they
old
nursing
ones.
off of like Morlocks?
Yeah.
Like, what is going on?
I have no idea, and I agree. That's definitely one of the weirder,
It's just a big hole of like no information. In
big
the book.
plot hole. I mean,
Yeah.
not that it's a plot hole. I'm sure there's an answer
It's
to it.
just-
Just wasn't necessary for the story, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I don't know, some characters they just meant different in the movie, I guess for more cinematic purposes.
They just
But I
hit
think-
different with the movie.
I feel like Weena
They do.
Weena gave the time traveler more motivation in the book than this is a girl that like you barely know, and she's kind of she's a one-dimensional character and kind of like a ditz, where it's like she's more childlike and he wants to protect her or whatever, in the book, and so that gives it more motivation for like why he wants to go and like fight off. I mean, he doesn't even have to fight off the
don't know
Morlock for
who
a
the
girl.
actress is. She may have been prominent.
No.
I don't
If she-
think
I know
she
that
was really
actor
prominent.
was.
Because she looks like she could be. Like,
Mhm.
I don't know. She looks really smoking hot, just to reiterate that.
Thank you for mentioning that again. Maverick. That's very
I meant to look
important.
up if she was still alive. She is. She is 78 years old now.
Wow.
Does she have a repertoire?
You gonna watch a bunch of
Nothing
her
I've
movies,
seen.
Maverick?
No. Well, yeah, I don't know.
Black
I think
Hole, which is on Disney Plus.
weird. She's ancient by
Okay.
the time she did that.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff that I'm sure like there's some movie buff out there screaming at us right now.
Yeah,
like,
that
are you
doesn't-
kidding me? She was in
Yeah.
Circle of Power. Monkeys Go Home.
Yeah. A cinematic classic.
Devil Dog, The Hound of Hell. What? Looks like a whole lot of like cheesy
Whoa,
garbage,
she-
but probably a lot of fun stuff in here too.
Yeah, I'm sure she had fun doing all that. I don't know. Yeah, I agree. I don't think that the forcing these romance subplots was a good idea. As far as like staying true to the book goes, and I also
That's the
don't think
picture
that
I
it
saw.
serves the story all that much either. I mean, it's pleasant to the eyes, and that's it. I mean, that's
Yeah.
as far as the
I don't
romance
know.
story goes.
There was some stuff that he was like, "You're just a simple woman," and he would just say stuff like that to her, and I'd be like,
Well, she's technically not a
Man,
woman,
like I
but-
said, calling someone simple, biggest
Yeah.
insult out
"It
there.
would be easier for me to swallow if she was just like a kind of a dumbed down like teenager, and she's learning whatever, like kind of childlike, versus just a stupid woman, another stupid woman.
Well,
love
they
interest
weren't-
that's
Yeah,
in
it's like
another
again
story.
they're trying to have their cake and eat it too.
Well,
with
they
this
okay. So
character.
here,
like,
I'll make an
she's
argument
dumb, like in the
against
book,
that.
but also she's dumb and she's a woman, so it comes off really offensive.
Well,
Yeah.
everybody's dumb as far as the Eloi go, because we get to see later on. So we'll get there in a second. Where are we right now in the summarization?
He was
they're-
camping out with her, and then the Morlocks.
The Morlocks
The
come.
Morlocks.
Eloy
What?
nabbed her.
Yeah. They nab her, and then
He goes into the bushes, punches them, and saves
You
her.
hear like
saves
the
her,
that fast.
and then we can just skip to the sirens go off at some
Yeah.
point, and then
Oh, he's climbing down into the tunnel because he
when
wants
the
to go
siren goes
Right.
off.
check him out.
Then the
and
siren goes
the
off.
siren goes off,
And
and
he's-
Weena runs away.
yeah,
and
she's
so
just walking like a zombie.
yeah,
and she
all-
goes in, and he just misses her.
Yeah.
It closes. The door closes right in front of him. So he goes to the other guys.
Mhm.
That same jackass who was
Yeah,
like
the
frustrating to
bowl
listen
cut
to.
dude.
Yeah, I think he punches this dude. I can't remember.
Maybe
He
he
gets
should have
really
if he
mad.
didn't.
Well,
if he
he
didn't,
talks
yeah,
to
this
him.
guy needs to get.
Because he was like, all clear, and he was like, it's all clear, and he was like, what do you mean all clear? And that's when we kind of learned that it was like conditioned in them
Yeah.
from the war to like go underground, and that's why.
Which
And
is
they were,
also
like-
something that we get to see a little bit. The seed of that is planted
Which-
whenever he's in like 2070 or
I don't know.
1970 or whenever.
I don't know if we mentioned this, but he saved Weena from drowning in the movie, which is
Yes.
the same as in the book.
Right, which
That
was good.
Nice. It
Which
was
was
And
really
none
good.
of the
Oh my
other
God,
Eloi
this
are doing
scene was
anything. This is like the
hilarious,
first scene of him
though.
getting
Yeah.
angry at them because
Her
they.
like
Yeah.
clawing at the rocks and,
And
the
they were just
close-up
looking
shot
down
of
at
her
her.
hands going.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
were just looking down at her, and she's like trying to
Yep.
grab onto
And
her.
that was
Dramatic
precisely
hands.
like the book.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
what
it was
happened.
exactly the way that
hand
happened.
acting.
Hand acting.
And then you get to see, and I also like how they revealed her face too. They know how hot she is because they did like the whole like face reveal,
Yeah.
where like whenever like she like turns and like you finally get to see her face and it's like gorgeous, and I'm like, what?
Whoa.
Whoa.
Look at her again, 'cause
Humana,
I
humana.
honestly
Yeah,
didn't think
yeah.
she was
That's what
that cute.
1960s
Yeah, I didn't
audiences
Oh
are
remember
yeah,
saying.
that's
that
what they would
attractive.
say.
I need to look at
I'm
her
not
in
into
clothes.
I guess.
So, so and then he tries to get as much info as he can out of the bowl cut dude,
She's
and
okay.
No.
determines that he's gonna go
Karen.
down
She's very small mouth.
the holes, which are
Her
the
body
most
is
truthful of either of the tunnels. I feel like they look exactly like I imagined them, which
Mm.
is these little concrete tunnels made out of stone, and then they have like the tiny,
Pegs or
little
whatever.
pegs and stuff that have been made by the Morlocks, and they break away from time to time, like they did in the book, and he like kind of shimmies down, almost
Yeah.
falling several times, and gets into the Morlock's lair. finds all the odd machinery, just like we found in the other
And
stories.
he does spot like something horrific, but they don't show what he's looking
No,
at.
Yeah,
it's some skeletons.
such as 1960. It's all just skeletal
skeletal
structures,
stuff.
bones. He makes a comment about how
He's like, they're cannibals.
they've degraded to the lowest
Cannibals.
the lowest status of human existence, cannibalism.
Cannibalism.
Yeah.
So, and then he sees all of them still zombified, walking in a line, assumedly to their death, and like, being turned into a turkey or something.
They're fighting and then they
And,
get backed up into a room. Which is
Oh my
weird.
god!
Yeah,
I thought
so-
the
Just
Morlocks
backing into-
looked okay. The Morlocks in the 2002 one looked bad, right? The ones
I didn't
In
like
this
In-
look awesome.
I think they look pretty
they
gruesome.
were like
yeah.
a little tubby, and their like hair was like
Yeah.
shoulder length with their little.
I feel like
It's like a
bangs.
perfect like
They were, like,
1960s
had
movie
gray-
monster look.
Yes, it
but
looks classic.
Also, why were they shorter than the Eloi? Because in the books they're supposed to be like 5
Because
feet
they
tall, and the
cast
Eloi
adults.
are a little bit shorter.
Yeah.
And so, like, why not just make them a little bigger then? If you're gonna make the Eloi bigger,
Well,
Oh,
As-
and they were cracking whips, like whipping them.
and they
Yeah.
had
Like,
like
they were their
weird
masters.
little beady, like glowing.
they have glow
eyes.
red. Yeah, they're clearly light bulbs.
Dude, that was so creepy though. Like the first Morlock that you get to see clearly or semi clearly when
Yeah.
he's walking around in the lair, and you get to see these yellow beady eyes just like blinking, blink, 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 and you're like,
Yeah.
They put
what
them
is
stuff.
that?
Which is really just someone going
exactly, yeah,
flicking a switch on the wall.
Yeah, it was really creepy, but I loved it. I was like, oh my gosh, I was a little creeped out by that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I was impressed.
And they're blue also.
yeah,
They
they're
were
blue.
I thought they
Mostly
were like
blue.
grayish.
I mean, it looked pretty blue on my TV. but
I accept it. I thought it was blue.
I just knew they were like different colors than the Eloi, which also doesn't make sense because
Well, they were. In
if something is like living below the surface and not getting any sun,
it would just
they're
be
gonna
pale.
be pretty pale because
Right,
like I
but
don't get a lot of
if
sun.
they're like licking minerals or something like that, if there's like a bunch of silver deposit, that would turn them blue.
Ooh.
Now we're getting into the science.
Yeah, this was
Oh.
if you did you know that?
But
If
they're
you
eating
have
meat.
an excess amount of silver
Yeah, if you-
intake that you'll turn blue.
yes,
That's crazy.
You
There's,
can
there's
put
a
out
few blue people out there.
colloidal
Yeah, in the
silver.
world, yeah, they're permanently blue
Usually
too.
from people like taking old timey versions of medicine.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
colloidal
medicine?
silver. So like colloidal silver is actually it's a great medicine if you like cut yourself
I have
or
some
like
of
have
it.
a rash. Like you can put it on there and it's actually really good but if you use too much chronically, like this man would put it all over himself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it'll turn your skin.
I want to
pigment
be
blue.
like
Yep.
Violet Beauregard.
That's
where
That's my
I'm
theory
Blue.
as
But
to
I'm a lot
why
more flexible now.
Oh my
man.
gosh.
I suggest that the
Surely that-
Morlocks bathe in colloidal silver, and that's why they're blue.
I wonder how your
Maybe.
body reacts to the sun whenever all your skin turns blue like that.
I don't know,
Oh my
because I don't know
God.
exactly.
Real. That's a real. That's
Yeah.
him.
That's
Yeah,
the
he's
guy-
blue.
That's the guy.
Yeah,
He just loves colloidal silver.
Blue Santa.
golly. So they're
Oh my god.
they're walking around, and he's like trying to save the Eloi that are like walking zombified to their death. He disturbs them, wakes them up from their trance, and grabs a whip, and this fight scene starts.
Yeah.
That's
We
really
get a lot of good
There
punching
was-
noises.
There was no such thing as like fight choreography really back then. It was
No.
just like, you two like roughhouse for a little bit, and then you'll hit him real hard, and that'll be it.
Yeah. Have
yeah.
y'all
It
seen
wasn't very
McClintock.
McClintock.
McClintock, or yeah, I don't like saying that last name. It's a hard one. With the John Wayne movie,
Yes.
I've
and they
never
have like
seen
the
it,
worst
but-
fight scene in
Yeah,
history, and they're
yeah.
missing each other and stuff.
Yeah,
It's
they
like those
missed with
movies.
those. Yeah.
That's what he was
Yeah.
like with one of the Morlocks, and he was punching him, and he was punching in front of him. It's just the
I love when he punches the one into the wall and then it kills it. Like the light bulbs go out and then blood just goes.
oh, that was so.
It's like, boy, we,
That
we
was-
did this in one take, didn't
that was
we?
really
Mm-hmm.
funny.
But these underground sets look really cool for just like the
They
time
looked
period.
great.
It looks like
Yeah,
something out of
yeah.
Star
And
Trek.
he was yelling at them. He's like, "Go! The stairs are up there," and they're just standing there.
That one
So,
Morlock
this
he
is-
throws off of the stairs and it like dies when it hits the ground, but then he jumps almost the same distance and he does
And he's
not
fine.
get hurt.
Right. So this is my argument too for why I think that the Eloi are just all dumb, and it's not like terrible that Weena is the way that she is.
Well, he shouldn't fall in love
because
Yeah.
because I think that the intellectual possibilities are there, like the potential is there for the Eloi, but they just have to be woke up. Like they kind of just have
They
to be
all
woke up, and we
seem
see
dumb
this.
still.
We see this though with their ability to fight back. They were coerced or motivated by the time traveler, by George, to pick up the. She went for the torch. She took action.
Oh, and
And-
he was like, I
and-
need some.
And
cloth,
we
and
see
she
that
ripped it
we
off
see the
immediately.
Eloi while George is being snuffed out on the ground. He's being strangled. That the Eloi says, and he goes and he punches it. He looks at his fist. He says,
Yeah.
"Maybe I can use this to bludgeon him." Exactly.
I
yeah.
like that, but like either
Biff,
they're smart or
You
they're
get
not.
your damn
Like,
hands
Yeah,
off
they
her.
can't
Well,
have
they're-
it both
either
ways.
they have a deep knowledge of their, or either they have a knowledge of their culture from the rings, or they don't, and they don't question anything. You cannot have a sense of self and a sense of who you are and past or whatever. Because she's like, there is no past, there is no whatever. But you have these freaking rings. Like, you commit. Like, either they're 100% dumb and helpless, or they're 100% like
Right, but
self-reliant.
I think that's the case though, because what I'm trying to say is that just because you have the tools doesn't mean you use them, right? So that's what I'm saying that the Eloi are doing.
Yeah,
Is that
I mean,
they
like
have the
nowadays,
ability.
We see a lot of like science being completely ignored for the sake of like people just kind of believing whatever they want to believe.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's kind of something like that where they have like a clear solution or something before them, but it's just like a fun little thing that we can listen to, and
Right, exactly.
it's
Yeah.
just a game to them because they've lost their sense of curiosity, kind of like in the book.
Yeah, they never
Well-
utilize anything that they have, whether it's their physical body, their intellect, the information that they've obtained.
Well, he's like, what is
anything.
this? And Weena's like, oh, let me give you a full comprehensive list of like, let me explain things in detail to you. So I much rather would have had him learn things from the rings than from Weena, because either she's an idiot and just a dumb love interest, or
Yeah.
she has like a knowledge, she has a sense of self and a knowledge of like things.
Well, this is my argument. Because I keep saying this, is that the Weena was awakened first among all the Eloi because she was saved from the river and had this interaction with the time traveler first before any of the other Eloi, right? And so she was having this verbal conversation with him and has now been awakened more than any of the other Eloi, right?
I think that was something that you kind of stressed in the book too, that maybe she had the potential to grow
Yeah.
as well. I don't know.
Which I think is the hope that the time
That
traveler
ain't how
had
brains
too.
work.
No, I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no idea. But that just seems what it was, because out of all of them, like, Weena was the one that was the most articulate.
I mean, like social skills and stuff like that. I don't think that once you reach a certain age, your brain is not going to adapt to,
This is true.
Yeah.
or at least like not as much. I don't know. There probably haven't been enough studies on that, but I know there have been a few cases where they do kind of start to learn more and then they regress a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But
I don't know, like the feral children.
Yeah.
yeah.
They try to reintroduce them,
they
reintegrate
can't
them,
do
and
that.
they can't.
Oh
So,
man,
like,
that's one of the saddest. There's one
realistically,
example that's
yeah.
like one of the saddest things I've ever read on Wikipedia.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that they've done that a lot too. They did like a lot of early experiments with children in like mid-century.
Yeah.
They're like, what would happen if we just like
a baby
didn't,
Well, this was like a
didn't
woman,
allow
a girl who was rescued from a really abusive father who had just left her in a room by herself
Right.
and would
Oh,
beat
he,
her
like,
if she
taped a potty
cried or
chair to her
anything.
and
Yeah.
stuff.
And,
She was
and yeah, Jeannie, like the little bunny girl, I think is what they called her.
Mm.
And
She
man,
couldn't function. She
well, what's terrible is they took her away from that family, and she ended up being studied, and the scientists studying her, from what I read, were really, really great with her and actually started helping her develop her brain. But then they lost funding, and so they had to turn her over to her mother, who was like
What?
not someone
Yeah.
you want to go with. And then the mom ended up giving her up to foster care, and her foster parents like beat her. It's like, what?
How did they get a
It's-
foster child? Because you have to go through a lot of
it's
stuff.
in the 70s.
It was in the
You
70s.
can
okay.
do almost anything in the 70s.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So
But-
Anyway,
Basically, like the
think-
theory is like your brain can't grow much like after like
A
a certain
certain-
point.
Well, I think
or she would
also
never
if
have
you're-
adapted totally.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is that maybe they always had that growth. They just never had to use it.
I think Weena just translates to idiot. She was like the village idiot, and he didn't know it. That's why she was drowning. Cause she was
Yeah,
stupid.
because that's why
It's
everyone
just-
was like, "No, we just need to let it happen."
They were letting it happen
It's
on
been
purpose.
coming. It's been happening.
We're
They
tired
were
of
like,
her
please
shit.
let it happen. They're
I
like,
know.
oh god, this random man is about to save this idiot.
Yeah.
It's true. I
So-
just didn't like the Weena character. I didn't like
I
the love
didn't like
interest of
her.
it because it was much deeper and much more like, let me rescue you, let me save you, and that he has this like fondness for her.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
And it
I
was
prefer
much
the
more-
book.
Yeah, because it was much more devastating when Weena goes and gets like she
And
might
again,
have
it's like an
burned up,
example
like,
where you don't know
Yeah.
really
Why
what
Why
happened
didn't they
to
We don't
her.
know
kill
what happened
her
to her.
in either story?
she didn't die.
Because she's the
Because
love
she's the
interest.
love
She's
interest.
the love interest,
And-
Brooke. We gotta have that.
That's
I
what.
Gotta
kinda
please-
wish she
that's
died.
that's the only reason the women are watching this movie is for the love story.
Yeah, that's why
Mm.
I wanted to watch
Thanks,
it.
Hollywood.
Yeah.
I can't watch anything if it doesn't have romance in it.
Right.
It's my
That's a lie.
stupid woman
You still
brain.
see it to this
Listen,
day. It's like,
if-
we need the women to come.
Listen, if the Fabio books didn't fly off the shelves, we wouldn't be here, okay? We wouldn't be
Yeah.
in this situation.
It was like that movie John Carter, which the original title is John Carter and the Princess of Mars, I think. Something along those lines. And they were
Mhm.
like, well, Princess in the title, boys won't want to go see it. And Mars in the title, like, girls won't want to go see it. So let's just call it John Carter. And then nobody knew what it was about or cared. And then all of the advertising for it sucked. And so that movie flopped hard. And it
was
was-
that
it was a
the
pretty good
movie
sci-fi
that had the
movie.
little space dog in it?
Yeah,
That runs
they
with
could
dude.
rush really fast.
I
That movie
love
was
that
so
character.
fun, but it's just like every
That's all I remember from it, and then
it's like
jumping
a
around
story
really
that
high.
inspired Star Wars and stuff. And
Yeah.
so every trailer for it just looked like, well, we already got Star Wars movies, and this looks like the scenes from the prequels. And
I
anyway,
liked it.
different movie.
Yeah.
I never.
So they're freed, I guess now. What did they? Where are
Oh,
we?
well, they do kind of do the thing like in the books where he's striking the matches,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it shows like this kind of animated effect
bright
of it
red flash.
blinding the
The Morlocks.
Morlocks.
Yeah.
They all go.
Which I liked, right? So they kept the spider eyes. That was one thing in 2002 movie that I didn't like, is that the Morlocks had spider eyes with eyelids, which just anatomically doesn't make any sense. Why would you have a spider eye with an eyelid?
Yeah,
That
I
doesn't
don't
make any
know.
sense. Also, if you have spider eyes and they're like underground or whatever, then maybe they're supposed to not see very well, but they're running around during the day. And then even in the movie they said that they don't see very well in the light. But they were clearly just running around perfectly
Yeah,
fine
That
in the
was so
daytime.
stupid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So
it was-
in this movie, I liked that very quickly they transitioned while he was like looking around before he encountered the first Morlock, that it was nighttime now.
Yeah.
And so I liked that was like true to the book and everything, and like also just made sense with like their spider eyeballs. So yeah, that was cool. And then what happens next?
So Eloi start learning how to fight back by watching him and learning what fire is, and that is a good tool to
Yeah.
kill these monsters.
Right.
And man, they light one up on fire. This
Yeah.
guy clearly in like a
Yeah.
flame retardant suit.
Yeah.
But they really like murder the crap out of these things.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And so they go and they fend them off, and then they make their way up the tunnels.
There was a
and they
very
get out.
long shot of the time traveler and Weena. They're taking steps. He helps her up. Then it goes up a little farther. Like
Yeah.
it shows the whole way of
The
them
whole
going up the
process.
ladder.
I don't
like
ever
if they
notice-
don't show that, you won't know. Like how did they get up? Did they take the ladder? Did they fly? I don't know. I couldn't see it.
I never notice like the time that they take to do everything, but like older movies really take their time. Like there was
They'll
no
drag stuff
rush.
out.
Yeah, there was no rush, and so like when I'm watching older movies, I'm in a very patient mode. So
Right.
like I never really notice when things are taking too long or like could be
Yeah.
expedited.
I just noticed
But-
when the shots are really
I
long and
understand
weird.
the reason for the love interest of Weena. Otherwise, like, they didn't really have much of an explanation for why he went back. Because Philby at the end is like, well, maybe he went back to his beloved Weena.
Right,
And-
right.
Yeah, like, that's, like, his motivation for going back. Instead of, just like the whole entire franchise, instead of being motivated by curiosity and
Search
wanting to
for
travel,
knowledge,
it's
yeah.
by something else. It's by love, it's by fear, or whatever. So
Because that's what sells in Hollywood.
Well, both movies, it was
Money, baby.
It was for love, which was
why he went back. He had to go back for love.
But yeah, he tells them to like gather tree branches and stuff, and they drop those down the shafts, and then the fire causes all the caverns to collapse.
All of them explode, and somehow the ground only sinks where they're not standing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Exactly.
the little
and so
the wells.
they just, again, just like in the 2002 movie, the time traveler helps murder all of the Morlocks.
Happy ending.
Happy ending.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's pretty much it, right?
Well, the next morning he finds the Sphinx. The doors on the Sphinx are open. Finally,
It's kind of the same. Yeah.
and
Same
his
as the
time
movie.
machine's
Trick.
inside. And like in the book, he enters and the doors close, and he's attacked in the dark by the Morlocks.
And he escapes.
And he escapes in his machine and sees a Morlock's body decompose rapidly. Realizes he's moving forward in time and reverses direction and returns to.
I thought the
1900.
Morlock decomposing, like in the corner, was kind of
That
cool.
was
Its
kinda
little
cool. His
eye
eyeball
falling
fell
out.
Very
out.
Evil Dead.
Yeah, it looked very Evil Dead on that one. I was like, ooh, gnarly.
And then, let's see, it says, after he recounts his story, his friends remain skeptical. He produces a flower that Weena gave him, just like in the book.
Yep.
And Philby, an amateur botanist, says it's of no known species.
Mm-hmm.
So George bids his guests a good evening. Philby leaves, but returns to find George and his time machine are gone. And his housekeeper notes that nothing is missing except 3 books that she cannot identify. And I think they see the trail.
So he
on the,
dragged
on the,
it inside back to where it originally was, because that's where Weena was outside of the
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Phoebe
Sphinx.
explains that, and he goes, "Oh wait," and I like that. I was like, I'm glad that they didn't have like a huge plot hole. And he was like, "Wait, there's drag marks on the floor. You can clearly see that's where the Sphinx was," and it affirms that Philby, like, he completely believes his friend after that. So I like that.
Mhm.
It did a good job. I feel like some parts, just because it was old and time crunch or whatever, like the climax was rushed. It was a little bit different than the story was, but overall, good movie.
And definitely better in comparison.
Yes. Okay. Out
Is-
of 10 for 2002, go.
Wait, is Miss Watchett in the book? Do they say her by name?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
just talk
They-
about his housekeeper?
They say her by name.
They say
I
her
think.
by
I
name, I think.
I'm not so sure because her name is Miss Watchett, and I think that's like an invention for the movie, right?
Let me see.
I thought she had a name.
I have the book.
I thought
But
she was the
My
only.
phone.
I never
character with
noticed
a
her name.
both
in-
movies end with Philby talking with Miss Watchett.
Mhm.
In one, he's like, we could use a housekeeper at our place, and she's like, well, only till Alexander returns.
And that's
or
in the
whatever.
2002 movie.
Yeah, and she's like, I keep a tight house or whatever, and anyway, it shows that she's not
Which
just
that Philby, by the
left
way,
by
I love
herself.
that guy.
Yeah, that's a guy. He's from Game of Thrones. He's,
Yeah.
the
What?
Robert.
Robert Baratheon in
Yeah.
Game of Thrones. And he's also
Yes,
in the
Mrs.
Full
Watson.
Oh
Monty.
yeah, he
It's
was.
in
Oh
the
my
book.
god.
He's a
It
great
is in the
Verified.
book?
Yes, it is, because
Oh.
he would say how he could see her walking. He would
Yeah.
say Mrs. Watchett walking
That's
quickly back
right.
and forth. Yeah, so she was in the
I
book.
remember that.
Actually, I like that ending part where she was like, at the end, where there was resolution for Mrs. Watchett, because I'm like, what's her job now? Like, her guy's gone.
Yeah.
She's gonna be like, what do I do?
And in this
Not
one,
here for a
she's
couple of days.
just
At least
wonders
she
if
has a
he'll
job.
ever return, and he says he has all the time in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of, I mean, maybe she goes to work for Philby. Who knows? Doesn't really
Mhm.
get into it. But
Yeah. And
But
that's
that was kind of the
end
motivator
of the
for
movie.
him leaving. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had a lot of fun watching the 1960 movie.
and it leaves you wondering, like, what books he brought back to the future.
Yes. Like, what 3 books would you bring to the future?
The
Time Machine by H.G. Wells.
I would bring a Bible, hollowed out
would bring-
inside.
With your psychedelic.
It's like Dwight Schrute's iodine tablets, like all the things
Iodine
that
I
he's
don't
got.
know. I would have to bring like some
Matches.
useful stuff. I mean, I don't know. I would just be really bummed out. I would be like, I don't know, any book. I don't like.
I guess
what
like
book, a practical one on how to build
I don't
things.
know.
an encyclopedia of some sort, probably like a survival guide of some
Yeah.
sort. but you're also it's implied that he's doing it more to teach the people of the future rather than for his
Maybe
own.
he brought
So
like
maybe
a dictionary.
a generic, like a
Can't teach
maybe
people from a
3
dictionary.
dictionaries, because back during that time they had a
Something
dictionary,
Something for dummies.
right? An encyclopedia, like they had a lot of collections, would just take up a whole shelf.
Yeah.
Like each book would be a letter, and then you'd have to have all 27 of them
You just
on
have
a shelf.
A, B, and C.
Maybe agriculture or something, so that they could like
Maybe.
learn to provide for themselves.
But I don't know if that would be useful. 8,000,
You guys are so
800,000
boring.
years in the future.
Okay, okay, Twilight.
Twilight. Game of
Twilight.
Thrones.
Oh, okay,
Twilight.
you guys continue talking because I have to go get the hat to draw out of.
Oh, okay,
Ooh,
yay.
yeah.
for our next book.
Yeah,
Twi-
that's gonna be very,
I mean,
very
Twilight,
exciting.
I would bring the Bible because literally that's the biggest storybook of all time. I remember like
I
I'd
would
be-
not do that to the future, but
bring out the Bible. Oh, you're right.
be like,
Let me
you know
colonize
what?
you real quick.
Not to get too like political or anything, but I would
That's
probably not bring
true.
that book.
I mean, it's just
Personally.
it's a lot of stories in there. Oh no, the Odyssey. Bring the Odyssey. That's a good story. Because then you
think
can.
of what I would bring.
Maybe like a fairy tale book. That would be a good place to start.
I
with
bring
the-
like Grimm's fairy tales.
Yeah, like the
fairy tales.
Eloi.
Be like, these are the only ones you need to know.
yeah.
Be
The really
like,
scary ones.
all the stepsisters tried on the shoe, and then they cut off the back of their foot to fit in the shoe.
Oh man.
And then the crows started singing. Oh, what there's blood in the shoe. There's blood in the shoe. Have you ever read those?
I know that it does like the original stories where they are actually like pretty
oldest sister
brutal.
cuts off her first toe on both feet, or
yeah.
and the crows start singing, there's blood in the shoe, because the glass slipper is filling with her blood.
Oh man.
And then the other sister cuts off her heel, and they start singing again that there's blood in the shoe.
and then it fits perfectly. She gets to slide this bloody
She gets to put
slipper
her
on.
foot in that bloody slipper.
So
Honestly-
what do y'all rank the movies like you were saying
Okay,
before?
so as far as like accuracy goes, 2 out of 10 for the 2002.
yeah.
I mean, it was like they
You're
were
Sounds
trying
fair.
to have
giving
a good
it a
movie.
2?
It was like they were trying to have this Brendan Fraser action adventure movie that had like all these like Stardust, like all these like kind of whimsical
Yeah.
elements with a quirky, kind of unattractive main character.
Fun movie.
Whatever, fun movie in general. But for the 1960s, I would do a 7 out of 10 for accuracy and how good it was.
For accuracy on the 2002, I would give like a 0.5, because the only thing they got
Yeah.
right was Eloi, Morlock.
That's it.
That's
yeah.
the only thing they
Yeah.
got right.
Time traveler, time machine.
No, not right.
What do you
Where's
think, Brandon?
the saddle? I need the
Um,
saddle.
The horn.
Yeah.
Saddle. So confused.
I think there are still a lot of elements that line up with the book. It's just it's not the same story at all. It's a popcorn flick. It's
For 2002?
for mass audiences, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's probably mostly forgotten now. I don't think any people
Well,
really
it wasn't
revisit
even a
this
This is my
good
favorite
movie.
until it showed up on Netflix.
I think
not
it's
too
one
long
that
ago.
it made its way into people's DVD
It
collections.
was on Netflix.
Yeah,
It was
this is
not
one of
on
those that nobody
Netflix.
knows when they bought it or why,
Exactly,
but it's there.
somehow it's in there. So, because I have a
No,
copy of
I
it.
did with the
I
I have
other
a
one.
DVD copy of it.
Yeah, I had one
2002
too.
was
I
Yeah.
bought like
fucking crap.
2 other versions of the
I've
story.
never
I
heard
give
of
I
that
give
before.
the 2002 movie a 1.
You guys should have.
I was just trying to be nice.
I would give it a
Ooh.
2.
Yeah, I would too.
But if
Don't be that
if
nice.
you've
For
read
accuracy.
if you've read the book, it's a 1. If
Yeah.
you've never read the book and you don't know anything about the story,
It's a 0.
it's a 4.
It
Man,
depends on
it's
what you're
not
watching a
even that
movie
good.
for, you know.
Like,
mean, like,
the
that would
number
be-
increases drastically if you don't have any reference for the original story.
like, I wouldn't mind showing
Yeah.
my like 7-year-old that movie.
Yeah.
I was trying to forget
Yeah.
about
This
the
is
book
cool.
while watching
Yeah.
it,
They
would
but
think it
still
was
wasn't
cool.
a good movie.
They'd like it.
Yeah.
I'm sure I liked it when I watched it a long time ago.
Oh, I like the music in the 60s one too.
The music was good.
It has that weird like
Now, if I was an English
like
teacher,
weird sound
I
effects.
noticed the music in that one
60s
because I wasn't
music.
worried about how terrible it
like,
was.
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
think the 60s
And
version is the perfect compare
The
and contrast.
sled, the time
Act it
sled
out.
that he travels in is like one of the more
So it'd be
famous
more
movie props.
accurate.
Mm-hmm.
And
Just have our
I thought they
own.
did a good job updating that sort of
Yeah.
like look for
Whenever
the new
you're
movie.
a teacher, if you
Yeah,
want to
I
introduce
agree.
it to
Awesome
your
job.
kids,
This is the
come
best
in.
part.
I'll be a guest
Best
Best
star.
part
really
is
is.
the time
I'll
machine
be
prop.
the.
I think it
you
costs
can be the
like
time
a
traveler. I'll
ton
be
of money
Weena
to-
and the Morlock
to make this thing.
I wonder where it is
Good
now.
idea.
Nice.
Sitting in some guy's garage
plan.
somewhere.
Yeah. So, 1960s movie. What do you rate it, Brooke?
I would say it's like for accuracy, maybe like a 6.
Yeah, I think they rushed the plot. That's what really bugged. Like
I think
the
the-
climax of it was like
was
not the same
not-
way. I like the whole thing of him going to the museum and collecting stuff, and
I think
And
the
the
general
build-up.
idea of it
There was
was
a huge
okay.
build-up.
Yeah.
he could feel like the impending doom and just like how big that was. It was like bam, right now we are in the climax right now.
You know,
Mm.
In
I'd
the book,
probably
so-
actually give it like a 5
Okay.
for accuracy.
What do you
I'd,
think,
I'm
Bryn?
I'd give it a
harsh.
7.
7?
Mm-hmm.
I'll give it an 8 just because it made an alteration to the story,
Yeah.
and I really liked Philby and George's relationship.
But that's not
I thought it was a
accuracy.
very nice addition to the movie, and if you're gonna add anything, they decided to add something and they did it well.
If we're gonna have
But then
another
they also
romance
added
story,
the
we'll
Weena
follow.
as a love
But then they added
interest.
Weena,
So
so
it
that was
subtracts
not
the
as
same
good. That
amount.
does so now we're at an even here because I don't think that should have been done.
Honestly, we should call this like for every like movie that we see and they add like an unexpected like love interest that makes no sense to the plot. We could just call it the Weena factor.
The Weena factor. The Weena factor. What else was I gonna say? Something about y'all should have seen the 1970s television movie
Oh,
version
really?
of this. It was, and it's billed under like this name Literary Classics, and it is so far removed from
More
book,
than the
like-
Really?
2002 one?
so much more. It's like a guy working on rockets, and he ends up building this time machine. The effects are terrible. The Morlocks are like mutants in the future. They
Are
wear
they
full
called
body.
Morlocks?
Yeah, they wear full body jumpsuits and just have like glowing bald heads. And
I don't know. I feel like
It
that's
somehow got
just
worse.
as removed.
it's so much worse.
That sounds
Ew.
terrible.
Yeah,
It just
it's-
has the same name and like similar sci-fi.
There was so much in the movie. I was like 20 minutes in. I was like, none of this is in the book. Not any of this is in the book.
Oh
let's
my
get
gosh.
to the story.
Well, I'm glad that we spared ourselves on that one then.
Yeah.
Oh
because
yeah,
that sounds terrible.
It was garbage.
All right. Well, so should we get to the drawing?
Yeah, let's
We're
see
gonna
what
do it
we're,
the same as
it.
see what we're
before.
reading next.
We're gonna
Yeah.
pass this hat around, and each of us are gonna draw one book out of it, and then we will decide amongst ourselves which one we should choose.
Yay.
So we'll give first to Rin.
We're each drawing one.
Just one.
This is what we did last time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We each drew one and then
We decided which one of the four
We
we wanted to
voted.
do.
we
All right.
voted.
Drawing.
Oh.
Something's got me.
He
Help,
puts his arm up to the shoulder into the hat.
All right, I got one.
Really took you a minute.
I know. I was playing it up for the
There,
viewers.
ham it
Oh,
up.
good.
Ham it up.
I'm gonna cry
Hamming
if
it
I have
up.
to read 1984 for like the third.
Man,
Oh,
I
man.
love that book.
I haven't read it yet. So.
I've been a little too
It's a book that's
depressed
worth to read.
in
if we get
isolation
it again,
to
I'll
have
be
to
happy
sit
that you
through
were
that
reading
story.
it the
Favorite
first time.
books.
It's
oh my
really
God,
good.
it's
so
an
good.
amazingly it's a great book, but
Are we reading these yet? Are
I
we
think
waiting?
we're all gonna draw
yeah, we
before
can-
we
Okay.
Keep knocking my microphone. I'm sure everybody hates that.
I keep kicking my camera.
Me too.
Okay.
Just over and over again.
Yeah, it's like shaking.
All right. So, what'd you get, Rin?
I got One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Damn, that's a good one right
Oh
there.
my gosh, I
Right.
picked the same one that I ripped last time.
Really?
I got the giver.
The
oh,
Giver.
good. That's a good one too.
That is a good one.
I got a Clockwork Orange.
Damn,
Ooh.
we have some difficult week. I got the Wizard of Oz.
The
No.
Wizard of Oz.
Ooh.
The Wizard
I
of
wanna read
Oz.
that.
I don't know. I'm excited about all of these.
Yeah.
These are cool.
What do
What
you,
do you
have
guys
again?
think?
You have,
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah. I
wait,
kind of-
what did he take whenever he was writing that? Like LSD, right?
I don't know.
I don't know, but
He was
I-
on something.
But it has a kick-ass movie adaptation,
Yes, it does.
Ooh.
and only one, so
Only
we don't
one,
have to
so we
watch
just watch
multiple
it.
True.
movies.
I
I don't know. In yours is A Clockwork Orange.
I know you've been trying to get me to watch that movie since I met you.
It's really good.
Yeah,
really
it's
good.
actually one of those books
like
you guys
it.
are gonna have to watch. I would suggest, you don't have to, but I would suggest if you haven't watched the movie already,
Yeah.
to watch it first.
But it's one of those movies where they
Yeah?
add like a love interest, and it's no.
It's actually it's
That
one
is
of,
not accurate at all.
It's
Yeah.
very the movie is almost identical to the book. The only difference is that the language in the book is much more pure. So he created like a sub language called Nasdat that the youngster people use in the story. And if you just read the book straight off without watching the movie, you will not know what the hell they're saying, because Nasdat is like almost another language. So if you don't know, like with context, and you're like, I'm pretty sure we're here in the story, so this Nasdat must mean this. you
Oh,
know?
really?
Yeah, it would be.
Oh, okay.
I read the book, and it's almost impossible to understand if you didn't watch the movie first. It's very odd. And then you pulled
The Giver.
The Giver.
And this is one of those like good just dystopian novels that goes right along with like 1984, where you're thinking about the future.
Mm-hmm.
So
And it has a fairly good movie adaptation. Only one.
only one,
Yeah.
and I don't think it's that great. But
I've never read the book, so that's why I think it's okay.
I read this.
I've never
I
seen
read
the
this in
movie.
5th grade, guys.
It
Like,
hits different once you've read the book.
like,
Okay.
that's not different.
Yeah.
I watched it when it first came out in theaters, not having read the book.
It's
Leaving
got,
the movie theater
it's got
thinking,
Taylor Swift in it.
thinking I should
Yeah, it
definitely.
Oh, then I
forgot about that.
definitely don't want to watch it.
I don't know about you, but
This is a
I'd
good
watch
book.
it.
Lois Lowry,
Yeah.
like classic.
I like Taylor Swift.
Good, solid book.
I kind of want to do One Flew Over the Cuckoo's
That's
Nest.
what
Yeah,
I
me
was
too.
It
thinking.
I
seems
was
the most
thinking about
classic.
it,
I'm
too.
leaning toward that. Yeah.
Okay.
Didn't we
Okay,
all
cool.
pick yours last time? You drew the time machine.
I think I wrote down the time machine. Yeah.
No, but you drew it too.
Did I?
I think so.
so.
because I remember
I don't
last
know.
time
We can go
all
back in the
voted on
archives.
yours. Right?
Ren's very
Yeah, I was
convincing.
He's
Ren always picks the
he's
one
the-
we all
I know.
do.
I've
Why'd you
I've
throw it
always
back
wanted
in?
to read
He's
it.
the
I don't know
Uber.
why I threw it back in.
He's
It's
the-
the most tightly wrapped.
He's the Uber. Oh, that's the Great Gatsby. He's the
Oh, God.
Uber
Gatsby.
Morlock. He's like controlling our minds
Yeah.
or something
Now
like
you
that.
may go back to your time. In Scar's voice from The Lion King, because that's who that actor is.
You threw it back in the hat.
He was the.
He's the
Uber
voice of
Morlock?
Yeah, of Scar in the original
He's
cartoon.
also, isn't he? No, that's Simba's dad. He's the voice of Darth Vader.
Mm.
So okay.
Mufasa. Mufasa,
Oh
Mufasa,
gosh.
Mufasa.
So we're gonna be reading One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That's
Yay!
really
That's
exciting.
really
It's been
awesome.
on. It's been on my backlog for a long
Me
time.
too. I've wanted
Both
to read it.
the
I've
movie and
never
the book.
considered
Yeah,
reading the book. I've seen the movie a couple times.
I've never seen the
Um,
movie.
me
Or read
neither.
the
I've heard
book.
about it. Like my mom really likes it.
We were
I know
supposed to
there
read
are
it in
big
school,
differences in
and we
both.
didn't.
But
Will it make us cry?
Probably.
I've heard it's
I
a.
don't know.
It's a
good
I mean,
movie,
I
though.
don't. I feel like I may have watched the movie when I was much younger, like on like TMC or something like that.
yeah,
Um,
I want to see like
I know the tragedy
villain,
in it.
the like villain of the story. I want to know how bad the villain is in the book, because in the movie, they're like one of the most hated characters of
Yeah.
all time in movies.
Oh.
So
Is Children of the Corn a book?
that I was
That's a
just
Stephen
thinking of
King
other
story.
movies that
That were
it
like-
is. It's a Stephen King book,
I'm not reading
which is
Stephen
more
King.
than 300
Gonna
pages. I
die.
guarantee.
God.
I don't know about that one. Probably.
I would
I
guess
was
that
thinking it.
because I don't.
No, that's
I don't
just
own a
Shawshank
Stephen King book
Redemption
that's
is just a
under.
movie, right?
You read Stephen
No, it's
King
a short
and he's
story.
like, and
It
this
is?
Yeah,
cereal
it's-
was a
You should
red
do
color.
that.
Like Cujo.
Shawshank.
Like they just go
Movie
off
is
like
so
every
good.
child was throwing
I
up
could discuss a
blood
lot of
because
things.
That
the
movie's
cereal
incredible.
caused red dye.
It
He
is
just goes in
really
these
I think all
tangents and you're
three
like,
of
"Get
Frank
to it."
Darabont.
Like,
He directed The Green Mile
I can't
too.
Oh, man,
handle
I
it.
haven't
Like I
seen
was
that, but
reading
I,
it
like,
in junior
need
high, and it was
to.
You got to.
It has
It's
that
crazy.
guy in it that has
It's a
like
little
the
too much.
deepest voice I've ever heard in my life.
Michael.
He's in
Clark Duncan?
Underworld. Isn't it the same
No,
guy?
it's a different guy.
Oh, they both have the deepest
I think that
voices
guy's
ever.
Kevin
That guy
Grevio
like
or something.
died recently. The one that was in Underworld.
No, the other one did.
The one in the Green Mile.
Which one? Oh my god, I'm getting them so mixed up.
I like Waterworld. I like Waterworld.
Oh, wait.
The movie? Okay.
Okay, we just
Everyone hates that movie.
Waterworld.
And I like
we'll
it.
just start doing.
Never heard of
Is that with Bruce Willis?
No, not Bruce
Nope.
Willis.
That guy
Let me
actually
think
The
about
guy
his
who
name.
slightly
Underworld,
looks like
too.
Bruce Willis.
the deep voice guy?
Yeah.
Starts with an M, right? His name starts with
See, that's him.
Okay.
No, he doesn't look like Bruce Willis.
His
No, but
voice.
people always say that. That's why they
It's
are always like,
difficult
is it
to
Bruce Willis?
understand him. His voice is so deep.
Okay, I thought it was a Mel Gibson
And
movie.
this is Michael
No.
Clark Duncan.
Oh, okay. Yes.
He's the
Oh,
one
that
that's
died.
in Ricky Bobby,
And
Yeah.
Talladega
Mile.
Nights. And he is the one that died.
Guys,
Oh, okay.
isn't the Green Mile a Stephen King?
It's
Mhm.
Kevin Costner.
Kevin Costner.
Man, I like-
Oh,
What?
I love Kevin Costner. He
I like
plays
his
some-
Robin
Waterworld?
Hood.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Dennis Hopper.
Mm-hmm. Good. I feel like it's a good movie. Like for me, it's like up there with Mad Max.
The only thing wrong with it, really,
like
it
old
was
Mad
that
Max or new Mad Max?
Old.
the budget just kept getting overblown bigger and bigger and bigger to the point where they were never going to like recoup what they spent on it.
Yeah.
And it was just like a dumb, like fun action movie. So in the end, it didn't, like they were trying to make Mad Max on water or something.
Right. That's why I compared it to Mad Max. 'Cause
Yeah.
It's just so
And in
like
the end,
desert.
it just kind
No,
of became
water.
an okay movie that didn't make up for its losses.
Well, one thing from Waterworld that I remember, and I searched for it today, is the meat that is in one of those scenes. He kills one of those underwater monsters, and then he carves like a big chunk of meat off of it and starts cooking it on his boat. And that meat just looks so good. Like he throws it onto.
It's one of those movie foods that
Right.
just looks so enticing.
Exactly. I don't know if it's
Sometimes.
he eats it too. So I'm like, is this a real? Did they just get some meat? Like, what is this? Is this whale meat?
What kind of animal?
What is
so I
this?
can
But he
start
throws
cooking.
it on the grill and it starts sizzling so loud. And I'm like, boy. And you can see the fat pockets on it. And I'm like, oh my gosh. It looks.
I didn't even remember
So good.
underwater
Man,
monsters
sometimes
in that
movies
movie.
just
Yeah, it was
make
like
the best
floating
looking
around, and he
food.
was like,
Like
"We gotta
the
get it,"
cartoon,
and then he like
chicken
goes down and
legs.
like kills it,
Oh
and
my
then he
god.
like brings
Have
its
you
meat.
seen Hook?
Yeah,
Brings
so,
its meat.
like I
Yeah.
think the way that it's
Whenever
cut
ice
is they like
food,
kill
like
it,
Yeah, so
and then it
whenever
cuts to
they're
him throwing the meat on
throwing
there.
the
Oh,
food
okay,
at each
gotcha.
other, and it's all like colorful, like paste-looking food, but it looks so
Oh,
good.
and Hook?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I always have wanted to eat
I always
the
thought that
food
looked really
at
good,
Banquet
and,
Hook.
James and the
So
Giant
good.
Peach, like the floats that they make inside the peach. I
Yeah.
always thought those.
Oh
were
my god,
Yes.
Cloudy with
Yes.
a Chance of Meatballs always makes me so hungry because for some reason the food in that movie
You
just
guys
looks
want to get hungry?
amazing.
Go watch any Studio Ghibli movie because
Oh,
they have beautiful food.
it's
I've
all
been
just like
beefing up.
Asian cuisine.
My
that looks
Studio Ghibli
fantastic.
collection is almost complete, and I'm poor because of it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh
snap.
my god.
And now it's about to come to
It was
Netflix
rough.
or
I was
something.
watching-
I'll be so upset. I doubt they would do that because they're like Disney. They like every 10 years like open the vault and like sell like a collection.
Yeah,
They're like buy the full collection for
I have to do it
$400.
now.
that's one of those where I'm like, I don't watch anime, but I do watch that.
Yes, Studio
It
Ghibli
just-
is
it's
really
different.
good. Yeah. So, all right. This has been the Fall Book Club. We discussed The Time Machine by H.G. Wells,
And a lot of
and we
movies.
compared the 2002 movie, the 1960 movie, to the book, and it was a lot of fun. So, 2002 movie
Finally
sucked.
did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
finally.
The 1960 movie
Post-quarantine.
was not too shabby and
It was alright.
even enjoyable.
Yes.
And I thought it was enjoyable.
Mhm.
And we have
And
drawn
just because of Weena.
at random from a top hat the next book, which will be One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So we're having a lot of fun, and I'll put the book in the description for you guys to buy with the Amazon link. So you can buy, and a portion of that will go to help us out, like with the whole thing, and buy more books. And we will be here next Saturday at 3,
That works.
potentially, in case we need to reschedule.
I'll have to check my schedule.
Yeah, we'll
Okay,
see.
yeah.
We'll see where we are, and we'll try and give you a few days in advance from now to
Notice.
know when we're gonna go live. So I should have said this in the beginning, but in case you want to come back to this video, if you're watching on YouTube or something, the timestamps are below.
Yeah.
So
At the very
I
end.
always forget to put that at the
Very
beginning,
end, yeah.
but thanks for sticking with us on that one. And
You
if
like
you
edit it in. You're like,
Yeah.
hold on, let me move this part. to
So
very
the full
front.
timestamps, if you want to find anything specific throughout this whole 2-hour conversation, it'll be down there. So thanks so much. We appreciate you, and that'll be it. Alexander, close us down.